Hello, welcome to a new reaction video. My name is Larissa and today I'm going to react to another Patreon request. Today I'm going to react to some videos and they all have the same theme. It's all about World War II. But my Patreon requested like 5 videos, but it's all from the same maker with the same team. So I was like, okay, I can just make like one video of that. So that's what I'm going to do today. And the person who made these videos, his name is Nick and his channel is called The Fat Electrician. So also putting the channel in the description. So if you want to check out more of his videos or whatever, you can do that. So with every video, I'm just gonna read the description my Patreon sent, so we have a little bit of an idea what we're going to watch. And the first one is called Weaponizing Ice Cream in World War II. I'm very curious about this one. And it says, the first one is a very short video about the little known ice cream ships used by the US Navy. Yeah, that was a thing and it is hilarious. Okay, so yeah, I'm very curious what he's gonna tell us about this. It's only a video of 5 minutes indeed, but yeah, I'm very excited to hear more about this subject. So yeah, let's watch the first video.
Oh boy, this video is gonna be aggressive.
Aggressive.
Today we're talking about the biggest logistical flex of all time, the sheer amount of ice cream the US military managed to eat in World War II. Buckle up because it's gonna get weird. In 1943, the US military managed to eat 135 million pounds of ice cream. I don't know how you guys want to quantify that, like liters or elephants.
Yeah, nice.
384. Write that down. Moving on. Why on earth was the American military eating so much ice cream?
Yeah.
A couple of reasons. Reason number one, America, because America's always number one and we can. Buh! You're so dumb. America's not number one and the metric system's better. Buh! Okay, look, first of all, you're ruining my story. Second,
This guy has a lot of energy. I like it.
System's doing for you, but I do know the only reason you're not doing it while speaking German is because of America and fractions, so show some respect. As I was saying, reason number two, it's complicated. You see, it all started on January 17th, 1920, when the 18th Amendment went into effect and America would begin the Noble Experiment, aka Prohibition. Alcohol's banned across all of the US. Because of this, pretty much overnight, all the bars in America turned into ice cream parlors rather than go out of business, and ice cream stepped up to fill the social void left by alcohol.
Okay, yeah.
Put down, I'm trying to tell you that ice cream is essentially the new booze. And I know what you're thinking, why on earth would the American government ban alcohol? It's the land of the free, the home of the brave, and now you can't even enjoy a beer? That doesn't make any sense. But apparently America had a severe drinking problem back then, so the government had to step up and ban alcohol because they care about our health. Right. And then to prove how much they cared about our health, once people naturally started making their own booze at home using industrial alcohol, they started mandating to all the manufacturers of
that's what people are gonna do then, yeah.
Put methyl alcohol inside of it, which is poisonous to people, which as a result led to over 10,000 Americans being poisoned to death during Prohibition by their own government. Because
well, that's going well.
To make them healthy.
I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
But at least there is a silver lining because Prohibition's how we got NASCAR. NASCAR's born. A lot of left turns. Anyways, the point I'm trying to get across to you is the majority of the people that served in World War II grew up in an era where their alcohol was ice cream. Meaning that they're going to do all the ridiculous shit that military members do for alcohol, but they're going to do it for ice cream. I mean, during the Korean War, the Seabees stole a train full of booze, and during World War II in 1942 when the USS Lexington, an aircraft carrier, got sank by 2 torpedoes. While the ship was sinking, the crew decided that it was very important that they raided the mess hall first to take all the ice cream with them.
That is so random.
In life rafts eating ice cream out of their helmets. The crews for B-17 and B-24 bombers used to take ice cream mix, put it inside of ammo cans, and then stick it inside the ball turrets when they went on a bombing run, because then if they made it back after successfully bombing the enemy, the ball turret got cold enough and there was enough turbulence that it would both chill and churn the ice cream, so then they had fresh ice cream afterwards. There were literally mobile ice cream factories that would follow the front line just behind it and deliver fresh ice cream to the front line every day. And then we get to the absolute pinnacle of logistical.
Is this real? This is crazy. I had no idea.
Yeah, the Navy had 3 of these things. They could make 500 gallons of ice cream a day. They had enough refrigerated storage to hold 2,000 gallons, and their entire job was to make ice cream and deliver it around the Pacific Theater. Now, to be fair, it's technically not a ship. It was a concrete barge. If you don't know the difference, a barge doesn't move under its own power. It's basically got to be pulled around by tugboats. Also, when I say concrete barge, a lot of people seem to misinterpret it and think that it was a barge that was used for mixing concrete and then they retrofitted it to make ice cream instead. That's not what happened. It's literally made out of concrete. During World War II, pretty much everything was being rationed and the US military experimented with making boats and barges out of concrete, like the USS Quartz was completely made out of concrete. Later, after they determined that the barges sucked, the US Navy took 3 of them, spent $1 million on each, retrofitted it into an ice cream factory. And not only is this the biggest logistical flex of all time, it very well may be the biggest morale-changing factor ever. I mean, think about this. It is 1945, and these guys are eating a frozen dairy treat 2,000 miles from home, and the enemy is literally 15 miles from home, and they can't get food. Do you have any idea what effect it would have on your morale if you were the bad guy in World War II and you haven't eaten in 3 days?
They're just eating ice cream.
You have a superior warrior culture, and your team's gonna pull through, and you're gonna win because go team, you guys got this. And then the Americans come over the hill with flamethrowers and fucking ice cream cones. Maybe,
the
just
picture.
maybe, you're on the wrong side of this argument. That's like the Star-Spangled Darth Vader, okay? Come to the red, white, and blue side, we've got fucking ice cream. So in conclusion, booze and ice cream are on the same level of awesome. And next time you go out to a restaurant, you see that little old man with the black hat on the front that says he's a veteran eating ice cream out of a little dish for dessert. You know what's up. Thanks for watching. This out.
Okay, I see. That is so interesting. And it's just such a random subject you'd never even really think about. The thing is, when I saw that the video was called Weaponizing Ice Cream, I wasn't completely sure what they meant by that. I thought at first, are they gonna like ban ice cream because of that? Or I didn't really know what they meant. But then in the end they explained it, and it's so funny. But like I said, so random. I don't have anything else to say than that. It's just a really funny subject. And beside the whole subject, so this was the first video I watched of this guy. He has so much energy. It takes a lot of focus to like hear everything he's saying because he's talking pretty fast. I also don't feel I can cut a lot of these videos because it's all like pretty interesting. But that's all fine. I really do like the energy though. That makes me really like want to keep listening. So he does that really well. I'm gonna watch also some longer videos now. Let me see what the next one is. The next one is about Jake McNasty and then McNeese, who was in the 101st Airborne. He was not an easy company, but fought in the same areas, and the story gives a bit of a different perspective to Band of Brothers and the campaigns they were in. And the video is actually called America's Airborne Anti-Hero, Jake McNasty McNeese. And I'm not really sure what to expect from this guy now. I don't know anything about him actually, apart from what, was just written. Like I said, it says here, he was not an easy company, but fought in the same areas. So I think that's pretty interesting because, of course, I reacted to Band of Brothers. So then you maybe see like a bit of another side indeed. This video is 35 minutes long. It's a pretty long watch for just one YouTube video. But like I said, this guy, he tells it really well. He uses a lot of comedy. I like his way of telling, so I'm pretty sure he's going to make it interesting. So I'm going to watch the second video now.
This is hands down going to be the longest video I've ever made. I should probably pee first. Hold on.
Oh. Oh, what's going on here?
Today we're talking about America's Airborne Anti-Hero. Ladies and gentlemen, James Elbert McNeese, aka Jake McNasty, the leader of one of the most notorious military groups of all time, the Filthy 13. And just to clarify, in case you don't know, being an anti-hero is not a bad thing, despite how it may sound. You see, the textbook definition of an anti-hero is a hero that does not display typical heroic qualities. Which honestly, one of those things where you know it when you see it. So for example, a regular hero would be somebody like Superman. He's invincible, he shoots lasers from his eyes, and he always does the right thing 100% of the time. He never roughs up the bad guy. He always takes him straight to jail because the justice system never messes up anything. He only has sex in the missionary position. He always changes the batteries in his smoke detectors on time. Boring, unrelatable, and completely inhuman behavior. Anyways, and then you have the anti-heroes, the fan favorites, the characters with human faults that they not only overcome, but turn into their advantage. Characters like Wolverine with his bad attitude, Deadpool with his morbid sense of humor. Hell, even Batman is an anti-hero because at the end of the day, it's more relatable to do karate in your garage, dress up like a bat, and then run around town beating up clowns and dudes on steroids than it is to be perfect. Yup!
Okay, I'm glad he talked about that a bit because I knew that, but it's good that he says it again, so I can keep that in mind now.
Anti-hero. I can't give you a better one. than Jake McNasty. All right, here's the
Okay.
deal. Jake was born in Oklahoma in 1919. He grew up during the Great Depression as one of 10 siblings. He had his first full-time job when he was 10 years old and continued to work full-time all the way through high school. After graduating, he became a full-time firefighter. Shortly after that, the attack on Pearl Harbor happened. America entered World War II. Jake, however, was exempt from the draft because he was a firefighter, but that's not what Jake wanted. Jake wanted to volunteer, and he didn't just want to volunteer for anything. Jake wanted to be a paratrooper and a demolition man. Jake wanted to jump behind enemy lines with a couple of buddies, be completely surrounded, and have nothing more than a gun and some explosives and just go out there and deprive the enemy of nice things. Got a bridge? Guess what? Now you don't. Nice power lines. It'd be a shame if somebody blew those up. That's what Jake wanted to do, and that's what he was gonna do. So at the age of 22, Jake set off for training. Jake pretty much immediately establishes himself at being incredible at any task the Army can throw at him, but also a humongous pain in the ass to his entire chain of command. During his very first week in the Army, Jake got in a fist fight with the staff sergeant in charge of the chow hall because the staff sergeant wouldn't give him butter with his bread. At which point, the entire chain of command is like, on one hand, we have to get rid of this guy. He's a loose cannon. You absolutely cannot be attacking staff sergeants as a private. He's got to go. But on the other hand, this is exactly the type of behavior we're looking for somebody that we want to drop behind enemy lines and expect to fuck up everything. So they just
Yeah, I
kinda
get
let it
that.
slide. He is the fastest person to ever complete this course. At which point, his leadership walks up and is like, "Hey, soldier, congratulations. You broke the record." Jake looks the guy in the eye and goes, "Yeah, if you think that's impressive, you should see what I can do when I have some butter once in a while." And that pretty much sets the tone for the rest of Jake's training. He absolutely crushes any task they give him, but also, Jake does not give a single fuck about the dog and pony show. that
Yeah,
he does.
I
He's
noticed.
not going to call an officer sir or ma'am. He's going to call them by their nickname. He's not going to salute them unless they salute him first. He's not going to stand outside and salute the flag during retreat, and he absolutely is not going to show up to formation on time, and he's definitely not going to be sober all the time, because that's just how Jake is. And because of this, Jake would be the only new recruit to not get promoted to PFC, which is a way bigger deal than it sounds like, because at this point in time, in the 101st Airborne and the 82nd Airborne, every single new recruit after 31 days of training got promoted to private first class. The reasoning behind that was they wanted to give these guys a promotion so they could make more money and ideally send that money back home to their families.
Really feels like this guy would have gotten in a lot of trouble, but also if you give that little fox, they can't really do anything anymore. If you just don't care, like, what are they
Here's the
gonna
thing,
do?
Jake didn't really care. Jake wasn't
Yeah.
there for the money. He was there for one thing and one thing only.
We're gonna be doing one thing and one thing only, killing Nazis.
So Jake is now the lowest ranking person in his entire company, and leadership was hoping that Jake would take this as a sign that he should start cooperating and get it together. That doesn't really happen though, and leadership now has no idea what to do with Jake. So they take Jake, they stick him in his very own platoon all by himself and make him his own acting platoon sergeant. And then as time passes, whenever they get another soldier just like Jake, they would send him over to join Jake's platoon, and he would eventually get 4 members in his platoon, counting him for a total of 5, and they would become known as the Dirty Five. And from there, things would obviously get really out of hand. Fast forward, Jake and his men finish the first phase of their training, and they are given a pass to go out on the town one last time before they have to go to Fort Benning for airborne school. So Jake and his men, his men that all outrank him because he's still technically a private, but he's also somehow their platoon sergeant, they all go out, they go to the bar, they get drunk. They end up running into some MPs. One of his men starts lipping off to the MPs. The MP goes to beat him with a nightstick. Jake interferes and says, "Hey, he's really drunk, let it slide." In Jake's own words, and I quote, "He's so drunk he couldn't hit the floor with his hat in 30 throws." Okay, so just let it slide. He's gonna get his men back to the barracks. It's gonna be fine. The military police, the MP, then tells Jake, mind his own business, as he turns around to hit Jake's guy with a nightstick, at which point Jake proceeds to beat the shit out of 2 MPs, taking their Colt 45 1911s, firing all the ammunition into a nearby street sign before handing them back their empty guns and saying, "Okay, now you can take me to jail."
Kinda legendary.
Here's the deal. The Japanese have the world record for the longest ruck march, and I want to break that record by having a group of guys march from here all the way to Fort Benning, 136 miles, and I think you and your men are some of the guys that are going to be able to pull it off. Are you in? At which point McNasty is like, 136 miles isn't a problem at all. I won't won't change my socks, and I won't even get a blister. Which, if you've never been in the military and you've never ruck marched, saying that you're not gonna change your socks or get a blister on a 136-mile fucking ruck march is an unprecedented amount of shit talking. It's like a NASCAR driver saying that he's gonna win the Daytona 500 without having his tires changed a single time. It's like going out drinking, ending up at Taco Bell at 2 in the morning, eating a bunch of steak quesadillas, waking up the next day, taking a shit, and not wiping, okay? It's not possible.
Love the references.
Jake is in a prison uniform with a giant P on the front, and 3 MPs show up with 12-gauge shotguns loaded, and they escort Jake to the starting line of this fucking ruck march like he's Hannibal Lecter. There, he changes into a normal uniform and takes off on a 136-mile ruck march to Fort Benning so he can go to airborne school. True to his word, Jake is one of only 75 men to finish this ruck march, and he did not change his socks, and he did not get a single blister.
How?
Which I cannot stress to you enough is a superhuman feat.
Literally how?
Jake is still a private and has still not been promoted in any way. After completing airborne training, Jake and his men are going to go to Camp McCall, North Carolina, where they are to receive expert saboteur training. Jake and his men continue to do what they do. They wreck every task that they're given. It goes perfect. Jake and his men are now about to go to England, at which point they are given one last pass to go out on the town one last time before they ship off.
Oh god, and what did they do?
They end up at this little tiny diner neighboring a train yard, at which point one of the trains pulls up, stops, walks across all the other tracks, and the conductors go in and they start eating at this diner. Jake is super drunk and he's like, I don't want to walk back to the base. I'm stealing that train. And that's exactly what he does because the army just taught him how to drive trains. So Jake proceeds to steal a train and drive it all the way back to just outside of Camp McCall.
Because why not?
The train goes in and goes to bed. But everybody knows Jake did it. Nobody's turning him in. So Jake gets away with it.
He gets away with a lot.
So Jake and his men arrive in England. At this point, Jake has 13 men in his platoon, including himself, and they all come to the same exact conclusion. English food fucking sucks, which is on par with every opinion of it I've ever heard, which seems weird to me because it's a country that took over most of the known world for the sake of trading spices, and apparently nobody came to the conclusion that, hey, maybe you should put some on the food. But whatever. Because the food sucks, Jake decides, hey, I'm a master at hunting and fishing and all this other stuff. I'm just gonna kill enough animals to feed my entire platoon by myself. And that's exactly what he does. The only difference is he has military grade equipment to do it. Jake is going out in the woods at night with a spotlight and an M1 Grand, and as soon as a set of eyes looks at him, it's getting blown to smithereens.
Damn.
Jake has his men going out fishing with explosives. Okay, they are eating everything. Couple of problems with that. One, there's strict water rationing going on. The soldiers are only allowed to have 1 shower a week is how little water they have to spare. So all 13 of his men come together and they decide, hey, we're just not going to take showers and we're going to use all of our water rations to clean and cook all of this game that we're killing. And because now they started stinking, they would all become known as the Filthy 13.
Ah, okay.
That was apparently all of the game
I
was
see.
technically the property of the king, and the only people that were allowed to hunt it were the lords and ladies of the land, which definitely was not Jake McNeese and the Filthy 13. So Sir Ernest Wells ends up figuring out what Jake's been doing. He gets super pissed, ends up suing the government for like $10,000 for all the animals that Jake and the Filthy 13 ate. The entire unit gets in a bunch of trouble, and Jake's kind of just like, meh. I mean, what are you gonna do? I was hungry, so I ate some food. What do you want from me? If I'm in trouble, go ahead and punish me.
All of this just because he didn't want the English food.
Out into enemy-held territory where a bunch of Germans are going to try to kill me. Joke's on you. I'm into that shit. And the entire military is just kind of like, we literally have no way to punish him. So
yeah,
he gets away with
constantly.
it yet again. Fast forward June 5th, 1944. The day before D-Day, Jake and the Filthy 13 are given a separate and extremely dangerous mission of going out, capturing and occupying an enemy-held bridge that's supposed to be able to help Allied tanks penetrate further inland. After a day, they'll be reinforced from troops landing on Utah Beach. And if Jake can't capture and occupy the bridge, he is to blow it up so that the enemy can't use it for reinforcements. This mission is deemed extremely dangerous and borderline impossible, but leadership figures if anybody can pull it off, it's going to be Jake and the Filthy 13, because let's face it, the entire command structure at this point in time is basically looking at Jake's platoon like a fragmentation grenade of fuckery and bad attitude.
Yeah, no one gives a shit, so...
So after receiving their mission, Jake and his men go out to start boarding the C-47s to take off at midnight to jump into Normandy. At which point, Jake decides that he's going to whip out his straight razor and shave himself a mohawk. He tells everybody that he's part Choctaw Native American and he wants to honor that heritage. However, in reality, reality, while he was part Choctaw, he had heard that Germany had a lice epidemic and wanted to go there with as little hair as possible. Regardless, his men followed suit and all shaved mohawks. They then began donning black face paint, at which point Jake is like, this is cool, but we can make it cooler. So he goes over to the C-47 that had a fresh white stripe painted down the side of it to identify friend from foe, and the paint was still wet. So he runs his fingers through the paint and goes around painting all of his men's face with white face paint as well. Unbeknownst to Jake and the Filthy 13, there were camera crews there taking pictures and recording them.
Why do I feel like these guys are having the time of their life? Like, yeah, we're fighting a war, but look at them with their mohawks. Face paint.
So much so that it would actually inspire a movie to be made known as The Dirty Dozen, and Jake and his men would be none the wiser to any of it until after World War II. June 6, 1944, Jake, the Filthy 13, and 18,000 other paratroopers take off in C-47s as they prepare to jump behind enemy lines before the amphibious invasion at D-Day. About 20 miles from the targeted drop zone, Jake's plane gets hit with enemy flak fire and is losing altitude, and they have to bail out early. Moments after McNasty jumps out of the plane, the entire plane explodes, killing some of the Filthy 13 and scattering the rest miles apart. So Jake lands, he's completely unharmed, and he has all of his equipment. The only problem is he doesn't have any other Americans anywhere near him. And he's just going around trying to find any other paratroopers to group up with. And it's going on for hours and hours, and he can't find anybody. And he's starting to think maybe the whole thing was a catastrophe. Maybe it got called off. Maybe I'm the only guy out here right now. What am I gonna do? And he finally comes across one other American paratrooper, and it's a machine gunner that lost track of his machine gun during the jump. And this guy is running around Normandy with nothing but a belt of machine gun ammunition and no gun. And Jake is like, Jesus, okay, well, you're with me now, I guess. Here's my grenades. You take those. I'm gonna keep my M1 Grand. Follow me. So now Jake and Grenade Guy set off.
Grenade Guy.
Troopers. So they keep looking, they find some more. They find a squad of mortar guys. They find some guys over here, some guys over here. Slowly, Jake amasses an entire platoon of about 35 paratroopers, and they're all gonna help Jake in his mission to take out this bridge. So Jake and his new companions start making their way to go blow up this bridge, at which point they would eventually come up on an entire American unit being led by this colonel, and the colonel is like, hey, you're working for me now. I don't care about that bridge. I need you to go pull security over on this part over here. McNasty tried arguing with the colonel, but the colonel wasn't having it. He gave a direct order, and McNasty is like, okay, fine, whatever. I'll take my 35 guys, and we'll go guard this for you. So they take off, headed there. They get to the point they're supposed to guard, and McNasty just keeps walking because it was the same direction as the bridge. All of his men are like, hey, we're supposed to stop here. McNasty is like, you do what you want. I have to go take care of this bridge. You can come with me. I'd appreciate it. If not, stay here and guard it. I really don't care. All of the men go with Jake and proceed to make their way to this bridge.
He is someone a lot of people follow, though.
When suddenly, an entire squadron of P-51 Mustangs comes up and blows up the entire bridge, because apparently the American leadership determined there's no way Jake was going to be successful in his mission, so they blew up the bridge anyways. Thankfully, Jake and his men would make it out okay. None of them were harmed in the blast from the P-51. Now at this point, Jake decides, hey, we're going to continue to hold our position here, because if anybody is going to try to cross this ravine, they're going to do it right here where the bridge used to be. And sure enough, an entire German infantry battalion shows up on the other side of where this bridge was. At this point, the German officers make their way through the ravine and up to Jake under a white flag, where they're like, hey, go ahead and surrender. We've got 700 men. You've got 35. It's going to be a bloodbath. Just call it a day. Jake, being Jake, is like, no, but you're welcome to surrender to me.
The audacity.
That mohawked head of yours. I have 700 men. You need to surrender or I'm going to kill all of you. At which point, I'm paraphrasing here, but I would assume Jake said something along the lines of, yeah, you've got 700 men, but you're going that way and the battlefield is that way, which tells me that all my buddies showed up on Utah Beach and they've been kicking your ass so bad that now you're trying to run away from them. So the way I figure it, you've got about 3 options. Option A, you surrender to me right here, right now, and you all live happily ever after. Option B, you go back to your men, you hold your position right where you're at, and all my buddies show up in a little bit with a bunch of Sherman tanks and proceed to un-German engineer all of you motherfuckers. And option C, you guys try to fight your way through this ravine with me guarding it, which, to be honest, I would recommend the least. I have the high ground, I have fortified machine gun
high ground.
and you've got to make your way through a ravine first, meaning that I basically also have a moat. So I will effectively be going medieval on your ass if you choose option C. Now, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but if I was you, I would pick option A, because if you pick option B or option C, I can pretty much guarantee that the next piece of officer correspondence that you're gonna get is gonna be from a fucking Ouija board. At this point, the German officer storms off with his hair on fire. He's absolutely pissed. Jake then goes over to his men and he's like, hey, get ready for a fight. I'm pretty sure I just poked the bear. We'll see what happens. Sure enough, like an hour later, 700 German infantrymen proceed to take off and attempt to bum rush Jake and his men in their fortified fighting positions. Generally speaking, it is a terrible idea to run face first into machine gun fire. It's also a terrible idea to try to fight the enemy when they have the high ground. If you don't believe me, ask Anakin.
That's what I was also thinking of.
But running face first into a fortified machine gun position through a moat while they have the high ground, and the men running the machine guns are under the command of some American with a mohawk, Native American face paint, who everybody calls Jake McNasty, is literally a lifetime supply worth of shitty ideas. Jake and his men would hold their fire until the majority of the Germans made their way into the water, at which point they would open fire with 4 heavy crew-served machine guns, 2 mortar tubes, and a bunch of small arms, effectively mowing down and decimating the entire German battalion. On that day, Jake and his ragtag group of paratroopers were credited with removing 700 enemy combatants from the field. Shortly after that, the reinforcements from Utah Beach show up. Jake goes over to a small town. They get put in a holding position for a little while. Jake McNeese would find himself getting evac'd all the way back to France, where he would be reunited with the 5 surviving members of the Filthy 13, as well as receiving a bunch of new recruits for his platoon. At this point, they had a couple weeks off where they could drink, relax, do whatever. Jake's going out, he's getting drunk, he's having a good time. Then he would receive word that his platoon is going to be partaking in a new airborne operation referred to as Operation Market Garden, the largest airborne operation in human history, with 38,000 paratroopers jumping into Nazi-occupied Holland. He then received word that his platoon, being the bridge experts that they are, were going to have to go out, capture a bunch of bridges, defend them, and or get rid of them until they heard word otherwise. Then they receive word that they are to go help another unit take over this town known as Eindhoven. So Jake and his men make their way over to Eindhoven, and they begin helping to clear out this town, room by room, building by building, close quarters combat, them versus the Germans. In his book, Jake described this close quarter combat as very different from what you see today. It was one guy, one room. An American would kick open the door, throw in a frag grenade. As soon as the frag grenade blew up, the American would then crawl in on his hands and knees with a Thompson submachine gun and shoot anybody that survived. The reason they crawled in on their hands and knees is because, according to Jake, the grenade would kick up so much dust and soot and debris in these old buildings that you couldn't see standing at normal level. So you had to drop down in fire trying to avoid carbon monoxide to be able to see what you were doing. And this is how they cleared the entire village. Making their way all the way through it, about halfway through, Jake would be clearing a building. Jake would find a chicken. Now, this chicken had 6 eggs.
A chicken?
Finding eggs in the middle of a war zone in World War II was a big deal. Nobody had eggs, and Jake fucking loves eggs. Okay?
And he finds eggs.
This is amazing. Only problem, he's got to figure out how to get these 6 eggs all the way through this village without breaking them.
Protect the eggs.
For a second, maybe I could leave the eggs here and I'll come back for them later. And he's like, no, that's not going to work, because one of these other paratroopers is going to find my eggs, and these are my eggs. I want them. So he takes all the eggs and sticks them in the cargo pocket of his pants. And then every time he clears a room, rather than crawling in on his arms and legs, he slides in on one side, the side without the eggs, to ensure that he doesn't damage any of his precious eggs.
That is so extra, but I love it.
I've ever heard in my entire life. This dude is going toe-to-toe in close quarters combat against enemies with submachine guns trying to kill him, and his primary concern...
With 6 eggs in his pocket.
This is like a stupid video game achievement for when you want to play it on extra hardcore.
Yeah, for real.
So he continues to go on, clears out the entire village, doesn't break a single egg. It's absolutely incredible.
Really just sound indeed like a mini game or like an extra quest. Yeah, don't break the eggs.
Entire German mechanized unit with 10 tanks. At this point, Jake is like, I just want to eat my fucking eggs. This sucks. So Jake and the Filthy 13 go to work. Being the demolition men, it's their job to go around to the tanks and disable their tracks so they can no longer move. Everything goes according to plan. They take out all 10 tanks. Jake reaches into his pocket. Tragedy strikes. He's broken a single egg. It only took 10 German tanks to make this guy fumble enough to break a single egg and he got to enjoy 5 eggs for dinner.
Okay, yeah. Still pretty nice. I would have broken them all.
So Jake and his men find themselves at an army base right outside of Reims, France. Obviously, Jake and his men want to go drink in town, have a good time, see if they can find some women. The only problem is, apparently the 82nd Airborne was there last month, and the 82nd Airborne caused such an issue in town that the military had to bring in a special group of MPs to get the 82nd Airborne under control, and now all paratroopers have been effectively banned from town. I mean, to be fair, that's pretty on brand for the 82nd Airborne. Bunch of rowdy dudes. If you don't know, that's their logo. On paper, AA stands for All American, but everybody knows that it actually stands for Athletic Alcoholics. Now, Jake, wanting to drink anyways, comes up with a plan. He's got to hook up with a distillery all the way over in Paris, which is like a 2-day trip away. So, Jake gets a 72-hour pass, starts leaving to go to Paris. Paris is 2 days away. Do you really think that you're going to be able to take 2 days to travel to Paris, go on a week
just have a drink,
and then travel 2 days back, all in 72 hours? At which point, Jake looks at the officer and says, and I quote, "I don't know. I wouldn't be willing to bet on it, but I'm willing to try." At which point the officer...
Every time he's just like, challenge accepted.
So the officer just lets him go because he realizes that Jake's going no matter what. It's just a matter of if he wants to get his ass beat over it or not. So Jake makes his way to Paris, goes on a couple-day bender, gets a bunch of booze for the boys, heads back to base. He finally gets back. He's been AWOL for 5 days. They immediately throw him in the stockade for abandoning his post, at which point his command comes up to him and is like, "Jake, we've been talking. We really want you to volunteer for Pathfinder School." At which point Jake kind of has a little bit of a panic attack and he's like, "They're trying to kill me. Like, they're actively trying to kill me." You see, if you don't know what a Pathfinder is, they're basically paratroopers, but they go out hours or a day before the big, huge paratrooper operation, and they jump beforehand, and then they figure out the best spots to drop all the other paratroopers and radio it back to base.
Okay, yeah, that sounds hella dangerous.
Was incredibly dangerous. On a given airborne operation, it required 2 Pathfinders and 1 set of radio equipment to get the mission done. And on every mission, they would drop 10 Pathfinders and 2 sets of equipment because they knew that on average, 8 of them were going to die and 1 set of equipment was going to be damaged or lost. They had a 80% fatality rate on any one mission at any point during World War II. And that is why Jake thought for sure they're trying to get me killed. The only silver lining here is they can't make him do it, because Pathfinder is so dangerous that it was strictly a voluntary basis.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you can't just make someone do that, right?
And he thinks about it, and he's thinking about the war, and he starts to think to himself, you know, Pathfinder school is all the way over in England. By the time they send me there, I start school, I finish school, there's a good chance this war might be over altogether, and I'm not gonna have to make another combat jump. It'll be great. So he's like kind of on the fence about it now, and then he really starts thinking about it, and he's like, man, Pathfinder school's at an Air Force base, and even back in World War II, the Air Force had way better food than the Army. So now he might not have to do any more combat jumps, and he's gonna get some good food. And then it dawns on him. The Air Force base where they teach Pathfinder school is 8 miles down the road from Oxford University, and all the young British men are fighting a war right now, meaning that Oxford is just full of college chicks. And as Jake said himself, and I quote, "This seemed like a mighty fine opportunity to do some postgraduate work." Fucking love this guy. So Jake shows up.
This dude, man.
Jake goes in there. The commander's like, "Hi, Jake. I've heard all about you. I want you to be acting first sergeant." At which point, Jake is like, "I don't know what you heard about me, but you heard wrong. I'm technically not even a private first class yet. I've never been promoted. I am not the leader that you want. I don't care about saluting. I don't care about any of that dog and pony show military stuff. I'm here to fight a war, and that's it." At which point the commander's like, "That's exactly why I want you. I don't need you to salute me. I don't need you to call me sir. I need you to get these guys ready for war, and I don't think there's anybody better to do it than you. I'll make sure that you end up getting paid as a first sergeant the entire time you're an acting first sergeant." To which Jake replies, I don't really care about the money. Look, I've blown up every safe between here and Normandy. I have plenty of money, okay? I might be willing to do this job, but if I'm gonna do it, there's gonna be some terms. Anybody that's fighting for me is gonna keep having good Air Force food, and they get permanent leave.
He even always sets his own
At that
terms.
point, the commander agrees. Jake is now the acting first sergeant, which if you don't know, excels at pretty much everything all through Pathfinder school. They graduate, Jake is still acting first sergeant, and he gets to decide which person is in which platoon. So naturally, Jake does what anybody would do, and he builds a dream team of the 20 best Pathfinders out of all 400 and puts himself with that platoon. Now at this point, it's really looking like Jake might never have to go out on a mission as a Pathfinder because the war is really dwindling down at this point. Then December 16th, 1944, the Germans would launch a last-ditch effort counteroffensive to try to fight Allied forces. This would be known as the Battle of the Bulge, where they would cut off the 101st Airborne, Jake's old division, inside the town of Bastogne, completely surround them, and the 101st Airborne is now stuck in this city. They are running out of ammunition, they're running out of food, and they're running out of gas. And if they end up surrendering, it could turn the entire tide of World War II. So all they need is they need somebody to be able to parachute in, get in town, and be able to call in resupply drops to let the 101st Airborne have a fighting chance to be able to hold off the Germans long enough for Patton to show up with his army of 350,000 men. So you've got a crazy mission. Somebody needs to save the day. You're calling upon Jake and his dream team. There hasn't been a single mission to come out of the 101st Airborne in over 2 days. Despite that, Jake and his dream team are going to jump in anyways. They have to be able to hit a 2-mile diameter landing zone while jumping out of a plane that's traveling 160 miles an hour, utilizing parachutes that they can't steer. This mission is seemingly impossible, but here they go. They jump out of the planes, they hit the landing zone perfectly. One man, unfortunately, does die, but that is a 5% fatality rate compared to the average of 80. Jake and his men then immediately get to work setting up their equipment in opposite sides of town. And after one guy calls in one resupply, he picks up his stuff, moves to a different location. Then this guy calls in his resupply, picks up, moves to a different location, and they bounce the signal back and forth on opposite sides of town all day, sending signals for resupply. They do this because they know the Germans can triangulate their radio equipment and don't want them to start utilizing artillery to take them out. Within the first 24 hours of Jake and his men landing, they called in 247 C-47s for resupply drops. On the second day, they were able to call in 160. On the third day, they were able to call in 140. On the fourth day, they were able to call in 269. And on the fifth day, they were able to call in 129. Jake and his men have single-handedly provided the 101st Airborne Division with enough resupply.
What the hell? Crazy.
Enough time to show up with his army and penetrate through the German flank, effectively ending World War II in the European theater and potentially saving the entire war as a whole. So Jake has effectively saved the day. It is now time to get out of there, get retooled, refitted, and probably never make another combat jump again, because for sure the war is over this time, right? Wrong. Apparently Patton gets in some trouble, needs some hotshot Pathfinders to jump into Prim, Germany, and call in resupply for him. So they're going to Jake and his crew yet again. Jake jumps in, saves the day for a fourth time, becoming one of the only men in history to conduct 4 combat jumps during World War II. Jake and his men and some of the rest of the 101st Airborne would end up taking refuge in the abandoned castle of Hermann Göring, like one of the biggest Nazi leaders during World War II. And oddly enough, a bunch of the spoils from all the countries that Germany has invaded all found their way to his castle. Fancy booze, fancy wine, and apparently he was a racehorse fan because every famous racehorse from every country that Germany invaded had made its way back to his castle. So Jake, the Filthy 13, a bunch of other 101st guys are sitting there getting drunk on fancy wine, fancy whiskey, and there's like $100 million worth of racehorse sitting in the barn. Let's throw on a rodeo for all the townspeople, right? Right, and that's exactly what they do. So you've got a bunch of drunk paratroopers riding around all these fancy racehorses. It's a great time. And then my personal favorite part, while out at the rodeo, Jake would meet an attractive young lady by the name of Amelia. And Jake and Amelia would immediately hit it off and start doing some postgraduate work. I mean, dating. Oh, don't worry, it gets better. As it would turn out, Amelia's father is the leader of the local chapter of Hitler's Youth, which is just the absolute cherry on top to this entire story. How's the saying go? Screw you and the horse you rode in on. Jake's like, nah, I'm gonna raid your liquor cabinet, steal your horse, ride in on it, and then bang your daughter. This is the best possible ending to this man's epic saga.
For real. Every time you think it can get any crazier.
Just to recap, Jake jumps into D-Day, wrecks house. Then jumps into Holland, wrecks house, and then eats some eggs about it. Then he pretty much single-handedly turned the tide of the Battle of the Bulge, and then he proceeds to find the closest thing he can to a Nazi princess and show her that inches are in fact better than centimeters. Shortly after that, Jake would get sent back home to America, where they would then reroute him to Arkansas so that he could see a plastic surgeon about getting his ear repaired because it had gotten mangled during one of his exploits. While in Arkansas, he would have a run-in with the military police, get in a fight with them, get thrown in the stockade yet again, before being released the military police commander would inform him after he gets his ears fixed, they don't ever want to see him on their post again, at which point Jake, being Jake, informs the military police commander, hey, if you ever see me again, I'm going to be a civilian and you're going to be the one with the fucking problem because I'm going to kick your ass. At which point, the military police commander files charges on Jake, and Jake is immediately chaptered out of the U.S. Army, officially ending his military career after only 3 years, 5 months, and 26 days. Because that's just how it goes for the anti-heroes. They are absolutely necessary in a time of war and not tolerated whatsoever during a time of peace. Jake didn't really mind though. He had accomplished what he set out to do.
Yeah, I feel like he did.
Cash that he had liberated from all the safes that he ran across in Europe. At that point in time, he goes on to explore his own alcoholism, going from place to place, town to town, job to job, just kind of doing his own thing. He ends up getting in a ton of bar fights, not because Jake instigates them, but because every local tough guy hears Jake's a paratrooper, and they want to prove how tough they are, but ultimately the only thing they proved is that they could fall down. Then, after a number of years, Jake would have a near miss with a drunk driving accident where he would almost drive his car into a concrete wall, in his own words, only missing it by a coat of paint. Because of that, Jake would decide that he needs to change his own ways. He would defeat his alcoholism. He would
I just wanted to say, there's a lot of alcohol involved in his story, huh?
Find a wife, he would have some kids, and he would live happily ever after, working at the post office in his hometown of Ponca City, Oklahoma, selling stamps and slinging packages, and nobody was none the wiser that their friendly neighborhood mailman was one of, if not the greatest anti-hero of all time. So in conclusion,
that is so
hard to
cool.
put into words what an anti-hero is, but you know it when you see it. However, the best definition I have ever heard comes from Jake McNasty McNeese himself. When asked in an interview later in life how he managed to survive all of his crazy exploits, he said, and I quote, "I think I made it because God didn't have anywhere to put me. At that point in time, he was so busy, he was only putting people in one of two places, heaven or hell, and I think he knew that I would have goofed up either one of them. So here I am." And I think that might be the closest thing to a perfect definition that we're ever going to get when it comes to defining what an anti-hero is. So, thank you for watching. The best way to support the channel is to go buy some merch at thefatelectrician.com. Out.
Well, I stood retreat that evening and then went in town that night and got on a big drunk. The MPs was really mistreating a soldier boy. I stepped in, told them to stop it, and they said, we'll do it anytime we want to. So I took their nightsticks away from them, beat them to the ground. And then I took their 45s off of them and shot up all the street lights and everything around there. And I wasn't shooting at any people, I was just shooting lights. And then we went on in with them to the stockade. And I never did have to stand retreat again.
Oh my god. Oh, this video is so interesting. At first I was just really wondering, like, what did this guy do? What makes him an anti-hero? But like this guy said a couple of times, like, it feels like he's the perfect definition of an anti-hero. It's crazy. It's just, I feel like the story of this guy is so insane that it's just like, it kind of has a comedical effect. Just the way this all starts, because there's one guy who just doesn't give a shit about authority or whatever. He just does what he wants. He has a goal, and like his goal, the thing is, that's a good thing. But the way he does it, the way he achieves that goal, it's not particularly good. But it's also not like super bad. It's just he wants to do his own thing. He doesn't want people to tell him what to do and all. And I think it also takes a lot of courage. Like, if, for example, you look at the story where he encountered like 700 men and he's with 35 and he's like, no, you should surrender to me. I'm like, how does that even come up to you? Like, yeah, I can just say that. Just the audacity, just how does that even come up to you? That's just crazy to me. And then in the end, even just making it, you know? Also, just like the really random stuff he does, like, for example, the eggs, or that he doesn't like the English food, so he just decides to go hunt, and because they're not allowed to use that much water, they just stop showering so they can use more water to clean all of that and use it for that. That's just... Again, how does it come up to you? Like, yeah, we're just gonna stop showering just because we don't like the English food and we wanna, yeah, hunt down our own food. Just crazy. Also, the thing with the Mohawks, I really love that. It's like his group, really a recognizable thing. And also eventually that he goes to that school then, and anyone would have probably said like, hell nah. And then he just finds some reasons, like, there's like good food and college girls nearby. Like, sure, you know, you could die. There's a really big chance you're gonna die, but food and college girls, like, what the hell? And that also shows, like, because when they told, like, oh, they asked him to go there, and then they explained how dangerous that was, and I was like, but why would you say yes to that? But without even explaining it yet, I thought, okay, but he's gonna say yes to that because every challenge he gets, he's just like, yeah, challenge accepted. And I was like, that's not gonna be any different in this situation. So he's gonna say yes to that. Even if it wasn't even for those two reasons, I still think he would have said yes. And that he handled it so perfectly in the end, just selecting his own team and all, and then only one of them dying, which is only like 5% dying then, which is normally 80, like... And when they also told that he like single-handedly saved that battle because they ran out of supplies and all, then I'm just like, this guy really is a hero. But the way he does it, it's not like typically hero behavior. So yeah, really the definition of an anti-hero. I really enjoyed this one. So yeah, I'm going on to the next one. So the next one is called Most Comical Invasion Ever, How America Captured Guam Without Landing a Single Shot. And the description my patron gave was, this is the story of the most comical, bloodless invasion in history. That time America captured Guam with good manners and technicalities. Sounds interesting as well. So there was a whole invasion, they captured Guam without landing a single shot. Sounds impossible to me, but that makes me very curious about the next video. This one is about 27 minutes, so yeah, I'm going to watch that now.
Most of my videos are done on stories that I think would make great movies, and this one's really no different, except this one should be a Mel Brooks style comedy. Today we're talking about the chillest, most nonchalant invasion of time when America acquired Guam, or when America acquired Guam the first time. Our story takes place in 1898 during the Spanish-American War. Now, most people know almost nothing about the Spanish-American War.
Oh, this is not about the Second World War.
America is basically the new kid on the block trying to establish itself as a world power, and the Spanish Empire has been struggling for a long time. And for the 3 years leading up to this, the Spanish colony of Cuba has been leading a revolution trying to kick out the Spanish. And America has been backing this revolution pretty much from the start for a couple of reasons. One, America at this point in time just doesn't like European colonial powers being anywhere near them whatsoever. And two, if they can beat up on the Spanish and make them kind of forfeit their empire, hopefully it'll create a power vacuum and America can fill that, thus becoming a world power. Because of that, America starts sending warships over to Cuba to protect American interests, aka they were probably giving a bunch of guns and ammo to the Cuban revolutionaries to fight off the Spanish. Then on February 15th, 1898, a US warship, the USS Maine, blows up inside the harbor in Havana, killing 268 American sailors and sinking to the ocean floor. Now, as we all know, this is like the biggest cardinal sin on the planet, fucking with America's boats. The problem is, we don't know who fucked with the boat, necessarily. So the US government and the US media get together and they're like, well, if we don't actually know who did it, we're just going to blame it on whoever is most convenient for us, that being the Spanish, because we want to go to war with them. So that's what they do. The US media pushes it out to the American people that the USS Maine was sunk by the Spanish. The American people are now pissed off, and now America declares war on Spain. Now, to be fair, the sinking of the USS Maine is still controversial to this day. It has been investigated and studied and theorized to death at this point. I think the Spanish government, the American government did investigations right after it happened. The American government then did another investigation like 10 years later. Then they did another investigation in the 1970s, and then National Geographic has done an investigation, and it all comes down to nobody actually knows what happened.
Yeah.
There's two going theories. Theory number one, and the one that I believe in the most, is that it was an internal explosion, meaning that it was more than likely an accident, and the American government just took advantage of the accident as an excuse to enter the war. So why do I believe that? Well, it's Occam's razor. The simplest answer is probably the correct answer. The USS Maine is a coal-burning ship. Coal is combustible, and it emits methane, which is a flammable gas, and it's also full of black powder to be able to shoot the guns, and it's parked inside of a port of a country that is world-renowned for its cigars, okay? It's probably one big accident, and the crew fucked up, blew it up. Now,
makes sense.
Conspiracy theories come in. It was an external explosion, meaning that it had to have been an underwater mine, meaning that somebody had to have deliberately blown up the USS Maine. Now, there's three parties involved, and it would have had to have been one of those three, obviously, right? It A, was Spain blowing up an American ship for supporting the Cuban Revolution. It B, was the Cubans knowing that America would assume that it was Spain so that America would join in and help them in the revolution. Or C, it was America blowing up its own ship in a false flag operation to have an excuse to enter the Spanish-American War. Now, out of those three, obviously A, the Spanish did it, is what the American government went with at the time, you know, so they could enter the war because they wanted to, basically using it as an excuse, or maybe they actually thought that, who knows. B, nobody actually really believes the Cubans did it, that's just, I don't know, like an offshoot theory. C, that America America launched a false flag operation is a very trendy conspiracy theory that all kinds of people, including history teachers that I have had, have went out and said. There's zero fucking evidence to support this theory. Absolutely none. That's not true because it's actually the Cuban government's official stance that America did blow up the USS Maine, and even the statue in Havana honoring the USS Maine says that the crew were victims to imperialist greed.
Love that he just does that with the keyboard.
I don't give a flying fuck about the opinion of the communist government of Cuba, and neither should anybody else, because when you have over 1 million people that flee your country by any means necessary, and I mean any means necessary, they're making their own boats, there's people that are hang gliding all the way to Florida. When you have people willing to do that to get away from your government policies, maybe, just maybe, you have bad ideas. I mean, literally hundreds of thousands of people have left in a singular year to go to Florida. Okay, Florida has more Cuban refugees than Wyoming has people. You're so stupid. If you would open a book once in a while, maybe you would know that Cuba is a communist utopia. They have free healthcare and a 99% literacy rate. Oh, so you're telling me all the smart, healthy people that were in Cuba looked around and said, yeah, fuck this, I'm moving to Florida? Maybe they were onto something. Okay, look, all I'm saying is I've never once heard of a Cuban refugee making it all the way to America and then getting told by some communist college student with skittle-colored hair, oh, hey, but you know how to read and there's free healthcare over there. And they're like, oh, fuck, you're right, I should go back. That's never happened. Well, the only reason that Cuba doesn't do that great is because America has an embargo on them. An embargo just means that—
Is he just like arguing with himself?
Okay, look, all I'm saying is it's really hard to claim to be the superior way to run the world when you can't get along without the capitalism there, okay? Right now, it's the geopolitical equivalent of a 20-year-old kid still living at home that's mad at mom and dad for making him get a job, and now he can't pursue his dream of being a Twitch streamer. Okay, because historically speaking, that's the only way that communism works, is when capitalists are funding it. And if you don't believe me, we can look at all the communist nations on the planet, okay? There's 5 of them. We got North Korea, Cuba, Laos, Vietnam, and China. The only 2 that you can see from outer space at night are Vietnam and China, and I'm sure it's just a coincidence that they're also the only ones that have a McDonald's and a KFC on every fucking block. Okay, I'm calm. What was this video about?
Yeah, can we get back to the subject? He's very passionate about this, I can hear it.
Gets blown up, America uses that as the excuse or the reason to enter the Spanish-American War, declaring war on Spain. So one of the first things that America does is they get a hold of Commander George Dewey. He is the man that is in charge of America's Asiatic fleet, and they are currently stationed in Hong Kong. They go ahead and they give him the order, hey, take the Asiatic fleet from Hong Kong, sail it over to the Philippines, go into Manila Bay, and take the entire thing over, because the Philippines at this point in time is a Spanish colony. So that's exactly what George Dewey does, but before he leaves Hong Kong, he decides he is going to enlist the help of a man by the name of Emilio Alguinaldo, who is currently exiled in Hong Kong because several years prior, he had just led an entire revolution against the Spanish in the Philippines. Dewey shows up to Manila Bay with the Asiatic fleet, he takes over the bay almost immediately, at which point he sends Emilio ashore, he gathers up some revolutionaries, and they're going to start fighting the Spanish way before the American troops ever even set foot on the ground. Now at this point, something unexpected happens. The German and the Japanese Navy show up, pretty much for the same reason America's there. They also would like to own the Philippines. So now George Dewey just does not have enough men to go around because he has to keep all his men on the boats, potentially ready to fight the Germans and the Japanese in naval warfare if they want to do that, and now he doesn't have any American soldiers to go ashore and help out the guerrillas. So Dewey does the only thing he can do, he requests reinforcements, and it takes about 3 weeks for those reinforcements to even start heading his way. Captain Henry Glass is going to be departing from California in a U.S. cruiser known as the Charleston, and he is going to make his way over to Hawaii, where he is going to pick up and escort 3 troop transports completely full of American soldiers, and that is who is going to go ashore and fight the Spanish in Manila. So that's what he does. He goes to Hawaii, picks up the troop transports, and while he's there, he is given a sealed letter with orders directly from the Secretary of the Navy that he is only supposed to open once he gets underway and out of sight of Hawaii.
It's a secret mission in uncharted space. Let's go!
So now Henry Glass and the men of the Charleston are pumped. They get to go on a super duper top secret mission. So they get out in the open ocean, open up this letter directly from the Secretary of the Navy, and here's what it says. I'm not going to read all that. I'm just going to...
No, I was just going to say, like...
It essentially says, hey, on your way to
no, thank you.
Make a quick pit stop in Guam and take it over real quick. It should only take you a day or 2.
You're the best, don't die, lol.
So now the crew's super pumped. I mean, they wanted combat, and they just got orders to speed run an entire invasion and take over of another country while they're on their way to go invade and take over another country. It's like putting bacon bits on bacon. These guys love it. So the crew starts getting ready. They go and they dig through all the maps and books on the ship, trying to find out anything and everything they can about Guam. And according to the latest intel, granted, Granted, it's a couple years old, but damn it, it's the newest intel we've gotten. We've got to go off of it. There's going to be a Spanish warship there and a couple of forts guarding Guam. It is going to be a fierce fight, and we need to get ready for it. So they start training. They start taking barrels, empty crates, anything they can spare, and throwing it overboard. And once it drifts a couple 100 yards away, they open fire on it with the guns for target practice. And this goes on the entire time. And then finally, June 20th, 1898, they arrive at Guam. It is early in the morning. They're going to attack at first light. 6 a.m. is when they are going to sail in and launch their assault. So it's early morning, it's foggy, the whole crew's on edge, they're ready for combat at any moment, and they're just coming up on Guam, and finally through the fog, they can make out a ship. It's gotta be the Spanish warship, right? It's guarding Guam, and they get closer.
I'm so curious where this is going.
About to open fire on this ship. It's a Japanese merchant vessel. Okay,
Probably.
that's weird, but I mean, what are you going to do? Just keep advancing, I guess, right? That ship and those forts got to be in there somewhere, so they keep advancing through the fog, and they keep advancing, and they keep advancing, and finally, they start to see the silhouette of one of the forts off in the distance through the fog. But the problem is the fort is built directly onto a cliff face, and it's so high that the guns on the ship aren't going to be able to actually fire at it. Well, now we've got a fucking problem, because the sun is fully out, and this fog is getting thinner and thinner by the second, so we're going to have to haul ass and try to get out of range of this fort as soon as possible. So that's what they do. They haul ass through this fog trying to get out of range of this fort, and they do it. They don't get fired on a single time. They made it through. Hooray. So now it's like broad daylight out, and they roll up on this second fort. And this fort, they're going to be able to hit with the guns. It's finally go time. We get to show off our expert marksmanship. So they roll up, and they just start bombarding this fort with fire. They shoot at this fort like 13 times, missed every single time, and they got 0 return fire from the fort. The entire crew is just completely confused. What the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
I come here for a shootout, right? You don't be go get up. Go off. A shootout, right, is a fucking shootout!
So everybody looks at the captain like, hey, Captain Glass, what are we going to do? And he's like, I don't know. I guess we'll get ready to go ashore and take over Guam on foot, I guess. Nobody wants to fight us on the water, apparently, so start getting the whaling boats ready.
No one's just doing anything back.
So that's what they do. The whole crew starts getting ready, and while they're getting ready, they start to notice that there's a bunch of people amassing on the beach that they need to go to. So they're like, oh shit, this is going to go down. We're going to get in a fight on foot on this beach. Fucking, it's go time. So they're getting their guns and their kit ready. You know, the intro scene to every military movie ever right before the big mission is going on at this exact moment. And right then, a little tiny boat full of a bunch of Spanish guys rolls up and boards their ship. And the first thing the Spanish guys say are, hey, sorry we didn't return the salute. We didn't have any black powder or guns ready to do that. And the Americans are like, what are you talking about? And they're like, the salute you did earlier where you like fired when you passed the port, you know, to salute us as a courtesy. And the Americans are like, no, dude, we're at war with one another. We just can't fucking aim, apparently. Come to find out, apparently Spain had just
salute
Guam that they were in fact at war with America. And this is horrible for the Spanish at this point because, well, the boarding party was actually like the welcoming committee / customs. And more or less, they were just coming out to the American ship to apologize for not saluting and then make sure the Americans weren't about to bring any illegal contraband or diseases onto the island and let them know the rules of the land. And it ends up being a humongous issue for the Spanish in hindsight because this welcoming committee was pretty much comprised of almost all of the Spanish officials on the island. Like the entire Spanish government present was pretty much on that welcoming committee with the exception of the governor and the treasurer. And then there was like one other dude that wasn't part of the government, but he was the biggest merchant on the island. His name was Francisco Portash, aka Frank. So they have basically just inadvertently turned over the entire government right off the bat. So at this point, Captain Glass is like, well, this is fucking perfect. And he picks like the 2 lowest ranking guys, writes a letter to the governor and is like, hey, surrender. I've captured all of your guys.
I don't have time for this.
Why don't you just go ahead and call it a day? We don't need any violence whatsoever. They go off and they're going to hand deliver that letter to the governor. So while they're going to deliver that letter, the other ones are still talking with Captain Glass, and come to find out, Frank the merchant is actually an American. He was born in Spain. He migrated to America in Chicago, where he became a U.S. citizen. He then met his wife, married her, moved to San Francisco, became an elevator technician, and then for some reason got a wild hair up his ass, moved to Guam, and became the most successful merchant there. And to be honest, he's pretty pumped that America's taken over because he likes America more than he likes Spain.
Like, yeah, sure.
He's more than happy to help Captain Glass any way he can. And he's like, hey, here's the deal. Just tell me what you want. Let me go back. Me and the boys will start ferrying out whatever supplies you need, and we'll just sell it to you right here. You won't even have to go ashore. So Captain Glass is like, perfect. He lets Frank take one of his boats back. He gets his men, and they just start shuttling back and forth boatloads and boatloads of supplies for all the Americans to buy. And this is like my favorite part of the story because it's just one of those things that you read and you're like, Yep, that's too stupid to not be true. One of the Americans wrote in their journal, and I quote, Francisco's men sold fruit at astonishingly low prices. You could buy 3 bananas, 2 mangoes, and a pineapple for 1 cent, but one of the live monkeys cost 2 whole American dollars. It just goes to show you, war changes, but the men that fight it never do, because that's the most grunt shit I've ever heard in my entire life. Okay, now cut back to the 2 dudes delivering the letter of surrender to the governor. We'll call them Bob and Tom. Okay, Bob and Tom make it ashore. They start walking over to the governor's palace. They get about halfway there and they notice that there's like 20 dudes pushing 6 brass cannons from the governor's house down the side of the road. And Bob and Tom look at each other and they look at these guys and they're like, holy shit, are we actually going to try to fight the Americans? And the guys pushing the cannons are like, what? No, we're just bringing these over from the governor's palace so we can return the salute to the Americans. And Bob and Tom are like, don't worry about it. Just put the cannons back. God damn it. So they just keep going. They get to the governor's palace. They give him the terms of surrender, at which point the governor's furious, but also, I mean, what's he going to do? He's got 54 Spanish soldiers, and then Guam has a militia of 52 guys with no training. He doesn't stand a chance. He basically has to surrender. He writes a letter back that has to get delivered to Captain Glass. And that letter says, and I quote, "It would give me great pleasure to comply with his request and see you personally. But as the military laws of my country prohibit me from going aboard a foreign vessel, I regret to have to decline this honor and ask that you will kindly come ashore where I await to exceed your wishes as far as possible, and to agree to our mutual situations, asking your pardon for the trouble I caused you, and I guarantee your safe return to your ship. Very respectfully, Governor Juan Marina." Okay, so obviously this is a trap, right? The government's planning something.
Very respectfully.
Nobody would actually follow that. So the Americans get this letter, they read it, and Captain Glass is like,
It's undoubtedly a trap.
okay, so now the Americans fill up one whaling boat with Captain Glass and a bunch of soldiers, and then another whaling boat just completely full of soldiers. Captain Glass and his boat are going to go ashore, where they're ideally going to accept this surrender, but it's probably a trap. And then that other whaling boat is going to wait right offshore in case they need reinforcements for when shit goes down. But to the American surprise, the governor shows up with his 54 soldiers and then his 52 militia members, and he just straight up surrenders. So they take the governor as a POW, they take all the weapons away from the Spaniards, they take all of them as POWs, then they take all the weapons from the militia, and then they're just kind of like, you guys are from here. Go ahead and go home. We're just going to take the weapons. Get out of here. At this point, the governor is like, oh, hey, by the way, I wasn't able to find my treasurer, Jose Sixto. I have no idea where he is. Do you want me to send a search party to go find him so you can take him as a POW too? At which point, Captain Glass is like, I mean, this is a giant waste of my time, to be honest with you. No, I don't care. Let's just get everybody on the ship so I can leave. So they get everybody back to the ships. Captain Glass then takes a handful of Americans and sends them out to the fort that they had originally fired on, and they are instructed to fly the American flag over Guam because it is now a U.S. colony. So those guys grab a flag, hop in a boat, and they start sailing out to the fort. While that's going on, Captain Glass is telling everybody what happened. He's like, yeah, it wasn't an ambush. They actually did just straight up surrender. We took the governor as a POW, we took his 54 men as POWs, and then he had 52 militia members, but they were from Guam, so we just took their weapons and let them go home. At which point, one of the original guys from the welcoming committee, you know, the Spanish government, hears that, and he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Technically, I was born here. I'm super duper Spanish, but I was born in Guam. Can I go home too? At which point, Captain Glass is like, yeah, fuck it, why not? Go ahead. Then Captain Glass looks over to Frank, the merchant, who's still there trying to sell as much stuff to the Americans as possible before they leave, and he's like, Frank, you're technically the only American here. I'm not gonna leave any of my guys behind to run this place, so you're in charge, I guess. Now get off my boat and take not Spanish Guam guy with you. So Frank, his men, and the government official dude that's apparently from Guam all hop in their little boats and they go back over to Guam. By this point, the Americans have the flag flying over the fort. Captain Glass orders them to fire the cannon as a salute, and then the Americans start lowering the flag. And Captain Glass is like, these idiots are going to take the flag back with them, and we're going to colonize an entire island, and then we're not even going to leave a flag there so nobody knows that it's our territory. A little while after that, the American detail shows back up in their whaling boat with the American flag in hand, at which point Captain Glass is like, why? Why on earth would you take the flag down? And they're like, oh shit, I didn't even think about that. You want us to run back over there and hang it up? And Captain Glass is like, no, I don't. Just get in the ship, we're leaving. Just the complete dad energy of like, no, get your ass in the car, we're going to Manila. And that's it, they bounce. Just the most nonchalant, ridiculous invasion / capture of any territory
For
ever.
real.
Zero bloodshed, the Americans rolled up, captured the entire government, captured the entire military, put nobody else back in charge other than some random dude claiming to be
That is the most random part. Just like, yeah, you're American, so.
Literally gave him the verbal, hey, you're in charge now. So Frank is literally just showing back up on the beach in a boat being like, hey, the teacher said I get to be the line leader, motherfuckers.
It's a beautiful morning.
Keep it running.
If you're not picking up what I'm putting down, I'm trying to tell you that I believe this is the first time that America created a gigantic power vacuum and then just left it completely unsupervised. But not to worry, I'm almost positive that America is going to learn from this mistake the first time and will never ever do it again. I need you guys to fully grasp how crazy this situation is for Guam, okay? Imagine that you woke up tomorrow and the American government was gone. The cops, gone.
Yeah.
The military, gone. Nobody knows what happened, and there's just one dude named Frank
Who's in charge? It is so weird.
Fucking what?
What's your response to that, sir?
You know what? No, I'm gonna be optimistic. This is gonna go great. This is a recipe for success. So Captain Glass and the Americans make their way over to Manila. They're gonna reinforce Dewey. They show up, and honestly, they're probably not even really needed as far as overthrowing the Spanish goes, because Emilio went ashore. He started an entire revolution all over again, and they have been laying siege to Manila for weeks at this point. So the Spanish government knows that they're gonna have to surrender. There's no way they can win this now, but they would way rather surrender to America because America is a world power and they don't want to have to surrender to a local revolution because that would be bad for their colonial empire street cred. So the Spanish leadership of Manila goes to Admiral Dewey and they're like, hey, hear me out. We want to surrender just to American forces, so we have to get in a battle with just American forces. We're proposing that we have a fake mock battle for funsies. We'll like choreograph it. We won't load our guns. It'll just be for show, and we'll surrender only to American forces and keep our reputation intact, and you guys get to take over Manila. What do you say? The Americans obviously agree because not dying is cool, and that's what they do. They have this enormous mock battle and nobody has loaded guns, and obviously nobody told the guerrilla fighters because, well, that was the entire point, and then some of them joined in and their guns definitely were loaded, and 49 Spanish soldiers ended up getting shot, and then the Spanish started returning fire because they didn't know what was going on, so then 6 Americans got shot and killed. But other than that, the mock battle was kind of successful, I guess.
Yeah, I stabbed a man in the heart. I saw that.
So the Spanish surrendered, America takes over Manila, and the Spanish-American War would be concluded in December of 1898, and that would end with America now having Guam and Puerto Rico as colonies, and then they would also purchase the Philippines from the Spanish for $20 million. And needless to say, Emilio Aguinaldo, the Filipino revolutionary, is fucking furious, you know, by the whole lack of Filipino independence and whatnot. Understandably so.
Yeah.
Which pretty much immediately leads into the Philippine-American War that started like a month later in February of 1899, and the whole thing is just a timeless American classic. America gets guerrillas to do the dirty work for them. Guerrillas overthrow government. Now America has to fight the same guerrillas. An American vessel finally pulls up on January 1st, 1899. And when the Americans got there, the island was literally on the brink of civil war. Like, they were standing there with guns ready to open fire on one another when they noticed the American vessel pulling up, and they decided to postpone till tomorrow.
Wild.
So the Americans show up and they start trying to figure out what's going on. Both sides of this seemingly about to break out civil war plead their case, and essentially when Frank showed back up to the beach and said, hey, I'm in charge now, some people didn't really give a fuck. Imagine that. And the one person that cared the least was actually the treasurer that got left behind, which makes sense. He was the last person part of the Spanish government, so in his perspective, he probably should have been in charge. Unfortunately, he was also the only person that had keys to the treasury, and he made the executive decision that he was going to go ahead and give him and all of his buddies an 18-month advance on their salary, basically bankrupting the entire country. So because Jose and all of his buddies had all the money, they basically had all the power and they were essentially in charge, and this went on for a little while, and then eventually Frank and some of the other people there got mad and started a pro-America group, and things started to escalate and escalate and escalate, and eventually war was about to break out, and then the Americans finally showed back up. So the Americans determined that Jose did in fact steal all the money. They order him to pay it back, and then the American captain appoints a man by the name of Joaquin Perez to be the governor. He picks out his own cabinet, and now Guam actually has a government. At which point the American ship captain basically informs the new Guam government that they are under the authority of the United States Navy. Anything that was Spanish lands is now American lands, and other than that, here's your American flags, we're gonna fucking dip out. And then the Americans left again. They don't hear anything for a couple more months, then randomly another American ship shows up, but they go to...
It's like, do you want the land or not?
A couple more months pass, nothing exciting happens, and then one day a Spanish military ship shows up, and this is where the pucker factor kicks in. in because the Americans took all the weapons and the people of Guam can't defend themselves, so basically they're just gonna have to switch flags again. But to their surprise, the Spanish actually didn't want to try to take over Guam again. They were just there to pick up some of their military equipment, and they had permission from a U.S. Army general, at which point the new government of Guam goes, oh, that's unfortunate because we are directly under the authority of the U.S. Navy. I don't give a fuck about the U.S. Army. Get off my island. And that's it. They kick the Spanish off their island and don't let them take their stuff back. And then finally in August of 1899, another American ship shows up. The captain of that ship declares himself the military governor of Guam, and from that point forward, Guam is basically administered as if it were a U.S. warship. There is a captain in charge. He has a crew stationed with him there, earning it the nickname the USS Guam, and it would remain functioning in that fashion until 1941 when it was attacked by the Japanese during World War II, and then America would reclaim it in 1944, thus adding yet another reason as to why you do not fuck with America's boats. Thank you for watching.
Okay, wow.
Out.
What a wild story. Like I said before, like these stories, they're sometimes so absurd that it just sounds so like funny. Like it has a really funny aspect. Like how does something like this happen, you know? So they just take that land, but they forget to put a flag there, but they leave a guy named Frank in charge. And then sometime later they come back and there's a civil war, but then they leave again, and the story is just so vague, but like sure. It feels like they cared but didn't care enough or something. I don't know. But I gotta say again, this guy who makes the videos, he does the editing and just the jokes, just the comedic effect. He does it so well. Just the references he makes to other movies and stuff, it really keeps it interesting. I have to say in this video, there were a lot of parts where he kind of drifted off to other subjects. And then at some point I was like, wait, what was I even listening to? And then he was like, yeah, but back to the story. And I was like, oh yeah, of course, that was the subject. So honestly, for me, that wasn't very necessary because to be honest, I just kind of lost focus then. But then when he was telling like the main story again, yeah, I was very interested. These are just like really random stories, like small historical stories you never really think about, you know? And that's what I really like about these videos. The videos really have just like one main subject, and it can be like a really small subject, like for example the first video, just like the ice cream thing. I feel like mostly in like World War shows or documentaries or whatever, there's like so much happening. And to be fair, I watched a lot of World War II shows now, and I've watched some documentaries, so of course I feel like I learned more about it. But I really like the fact that he's just really focusing on one thing, and then sometimes it are like really random things, really small things, but it still makes you learn about these historic events, and I really like that. So I'm going to go on to the next video. This one is called The Most Gangster Tanker of World War II, Lafayette War Daddy Pool. Okay. And my patron says, the next one is about War Daddy, a tank commander that was the tip of the spear that was the Allied advance in Europe. A fun and very emotional story. So, okay. Honestly, just the term War Daddy made me think that it was maybe something funny, but it says very fun and very emotional story. So yeah, it's about this one guy, like a tank commander. Yeah, I guess we just have to watch it to find out what happened with him or to him or what he did. Because yeah, the rest is not really telling me a lot. So yeah, I'm just gonna check it out and see what I think of it. This is actually the longest one of the 5 videos I'm going to watch. This one is almost 40 minutes. So yeah, it's gonna be pretty long. But yeah, up to now I've been very entertained by how this guy tells his stories. And you can see that he knows a lot of it. That he has like a great passion for history. So yeah, I think he'll have an interesting way of telling the story. So I'm going to check it out now.
Before you ask, yes, this is in fact the guy that Brad Pitt's character in the movie Fury is based off of. And yes, the nickname War Daddy was real.
Oh, okay.
Today we're talking about the most gangster tank commander in American history, Lafayette Greenpool, his incredible crew, and their infamous M4A176W Sherman tank, known by its moniker painted across the side, In the Mood. Once upon a time, July 23rd, 1919, 2 twins would be born, John Thomas Poole and his younger brother by 5 minutes, Lafayette Greenpool. They both spent their entire childhood growing up in Texas. The Great Depression happened when they were 10 years old. Despite that, they were both star athletes in middle school and high school. And then when they graduated from high school in 1937, John and Lafayette, the two brothers, wanted to join the Navy together. Like everything else they'd done in their life at this point, they go down to the local recruiting office together and they both sign up for the US Navy. Then they go to get their physicals. John passes with flying colors, but Leigh, on the other hand, is rejected because his eyesight isn't good enough because he has one bad eye from an injury from when he was younger. Which is turning into a weird pattern at this point because there's a shocking amount of badasses that are originally rejected from the US military for apparently having bad eyesight. I mean, off the top of my head, we've got Lawson Red Ramage, the first submarine commander to earn the Medal of Honor, which I don't know why your vision needs to be super good inside of a submarine, but whatever. Then we've got Willis Ching Lee, literally an Olympic sniper that was the greatest battleship commander of all time, that after he had won the Olympics for sharpshooting was told that his vision wasn't good.
What?
Then, of course, we have
Crazy.
James Medal of Honor recipient, the pilot of the most decorated air crew in U.S. history that was also rejected because his vision wasn't good enough. And now we have Lafayette Greenpool, the greatest American tanker of all time, also being rejected because his vision just isn't quite good enough. Now, that being said, here's where Poole's just a little bit different from those other heroes. He's trying to join in 1937. World War II has not kicked off yet, so he's not overly motivated to join the military. So, unlike the other three, he does not cheat on his eye exam to get in. He decides that he's just going to go off to college and become an engineer. John ships off to go get trained for the Navy. Leigh decides he's going to stay around town. He helps his parents out on the farm. He goes off to college to become an engineer, and he also decides that he's going to start boxing to earn some extra money on the side. And over the course of the next 3 years, he never loses a single match because he is an incredibly talented boxer. Then, September 16th, 1940, America decides to reinstitute the draft because World War II is looming on America. Because of this, Leigh decides that he's going to try to join the military again, but he's concerned that the Navy still has records of him failing his vision test from a couple of years ago. So, instead, this time, he goes to an Army recruiter, gets signed up, goes to the physical, and this time, he does what all great American heroes do. He cheats on that eye exam and he passes. Seriously, the impact that a bunch of dudes cheating on the eye exam to get into the military has had on the world that we live in today is profound.
That is fucking insane, actually.
As World War II ramps up, the 32nd Armored Regiment's training gets more and more intense as they get put in different climates in different places all over the country. And at this point, Poole's developed quite a name for himself. Everybody knows who he is. He's a 6'3" boxer that's 41-0. He's never been defeated, and he is one of the best, if not the best tank commander that they have. He actually goes out and starts picking his own tank crew, and he picks the best of the best. In the driver's seat, he's got 24-year-old Private First Class Wilbert Richards, aka Baby, a nickname that he got when the crew was out for dinner one night at a diner, and the waitress looked at him and said, "I didn't think they let babies join the army." Despite having a baby face, Poole said that he was the best tank driver in all of World War II. He was so good that he could parallel park a Sherman tank in the middle of downtown New York during rush hour traffic. In the gunner's seat, we have Willis Ollier, aka Groundhog, a nickname that he got in the Mojave Desert because he constantly wore his goggles and had dirt rings from the goggles around his eyes at all times. He is the oldest man in the crew at 28 years old. He was a factory worker at an ammunition plant. He was exempt from the draft, but he wanted to go to war anyways, so much so that he had to go to the government to get permission to quit his job so that he could be in that tank. At loader, we've got 21-year-old Delbert Boggs, aka Jailbird, a nickname that he got because he was allegedly there because the judge gave him the option of go to war or go to jail.
I love all these nicknames, that they just all have one.
Probably the most physically demanding job in the entire tank crew. Despite his stature, he was able to load that gun faster than Poole could say fire. And then at assistant driver and bow gunner, we have Arthur Reed, who has not quite earned a nickname yet. The crew then decided that the fearless leader needed a nickname too. Poole was already becoming a legend. He was an undefeated boxer. He was one of the best tank commanders America had, and he made sure that everybody in his crew was squared away and taken care of at all times. He took complete responsibility for them. He was just like their dad, and for that reason, they gave him one of the coolest nicknames ever, and the same one from the movie Fury, War Daddy.
Ah, okay.
Coffee's too high.
I see, now I get it, yeah.
Not decide to name his tank Fury. He gave it a nickname that is 1,000 times cooler, and Hollywood decided to change for no good reason because they named their tank In the Mood. When asked what that meant later, Lafayette simply said, "That's just how I felt at the time. I was in the mood." So we've got the crew, we've got the tank, everybody has a cool nickname, it's time to get ready for war. They start training together super hard and become one cohesive unit. At this point, Poole, who's still been going out and boxing every chance he can, ends up joining the Golden Gloves tournament, and he actually ends up winning and becoming a Golden Gloves champion, which qualifies him for the national tournament in Chicago. At this point, the Army is willing to let him take leave and go participate in this national tournament because it looks really, really good for the US military if they have an active duty sergeant that's a tank commander that's winning national titles for boxing. Poole, however, decides against it because he has his crew, he has his tank, and he's not going to let them go off to war without him. So he decides to forego his dream of becoming a national Golden Glove boxing champion and instead goes off to war. Because of that, he is then offered a slot as an officer, which he also refuses because he doesn't want to leave his crew. He decides that he's going to keep being an NCO so he can be a tank commander and go out with his guys. Shortly after that, they would all ship off to England in 1943. Once they get to England, they just keep training, getting ready, waiting for orders, and then in April 1944, a famous boxer by the name of Joe Louis, aka the Brown Bomber, comes over for a morale mission where he's going to box with some of the troops, you know, get everybody ready for war, get them hyped up, doing something cool, and guess who gets slotted to fight him? Yeah, Lafayette Poole boxes Joe Louis 2 months before D-Day. And if you don't know who Joe Louis is, he's literally one of the greatest boxers in the history of the world. This dude has 69 wins with 52 knockouts. He has one of the longest reigning title runs ever. He is on a different level than Lafayette Green Poole.
Yeah,
sure.
okay.
Despite that, everybody's hyped. The entire regiment is going to show up to watch War Daddy go toe-to-toe with the Brown Bomber. And
That is
the
so
coolest
cool.
thing that's ever happened. So they have
And the
this boxing
support.
match, and you have to
Love it.
understand, a recipe for disaster because Joe Louis is just over here trying to do the right thing, help with the war effort, raise morale of the troops before they go off into battle. You know, he's being really cool about this whole thing. He's going from unit to unit, and he's boxing a new army guy every night for like months straight. So I mean, this is nothing more than a glorified sparring match to him. He's not going in there trying to actually hurt the army guy. Hopefully the army guy's not going on to hurt him. He's just going out there to put on a show. The world heavyweight champion is there and he gets to box him. So in the back of his mind, there's got to be a part of him that's just like, I mean, maybe I could take this guy. So Poole goes in there obviously wanting a real fight. And that's exactly what he got. The match starts, Joe Louis goes in there, he's dancing around, he's pulling his punches, he's putting on a show, he's being super nice to Poole, and then the first chance Poole got, he threw a hard punch and just cracked Joe Louis, allegedly stumbled him a little bit, and then Joe Louis tied up with Poole and whispered in his ear, I'm going to teach you a big lesson. The ref then broke him apart and Joe Louis proceeded to beat the shit out of Poole in front of the entire regiment. Poole is later quoted as saying that he was turned any which way but loose by the Brown Bomber. Now the silver lining is that Poole somehow managed to not get knocked out, which is an achievement in itself going up against Joe Louis. And just so we're clear, if you're not familiar with combat sports, Joe Louis is absolutely not being a dick right now. This is 100% expected. This is how everybody acts in that situation. And Lafayette
Yeah, I
Poole
mean,
knew
fair.
that's how this would go down the minute he decided to crack him because he had like 40 plus boxing matches. He knew what he was getting into. He got exactly what he was looking for, and it's absolutely hilarious. And in War Daddy's defense, it is actually way cooler to say I got in a legitimate fight with Joe Louis and survived, even though I got my ass beat, than it is to say I had a glorified sparring match with Joe Louis one time. And pretty much everybody else agrees, and this serves to grow Poole's reputation even more. Fast forward 2 months, June 23rd, 1944, War Daddy and his crew would arrive at the beaches of Normandy 2 weeks after D-Day. For the next 5 days, they would make their way to the front lines, following the trail of destruction left by the Allied forces before them. And on the 6th day, June 29th, 1944, they would go out on their first mission, attempting to drive the enemy further back. Using a combination of tanks and infantry, they would drive off the main road through crop fields, and they would cut through the different fields, and each field was divided by this thin row of trees and bushes that was called a hedgerow. As they go through field after field and have the tanks drive through hedgerow after hedgerow, making a path for the infantry, they would come through another hedgerow where seemingly nothing was any different. As they continued to advance through the field, as soon as they reached the midway point, the 2 corners of the hedgerow they were in, up ahead of them, would open fire. They had walked directly into a German anti-tank unit's ambush as they began taking fire from anti-tank guns, machine guns, and Panzerfaust, or tank punches, which were an early German rocket launcher designed to take out Allied tanks. The Germans were so well camouflaged in the hedgerows ahead that they couldn't even be seen. The only thing they could fire at was the muzzle flashes of the Germans firing at them first. As the Americans began...
It's pretty nice that there's this movie because he can use a lot of stuff from that. I mean, I suppose this is from the movie as well. That also really helps me create an image.
The American tanks, including In the Mood, attempted to drive forward to push through the ambush, but as they closed the distance between them and the German anti-tank unit, they came into the effective range of the tank punchers. In the Mood and 17 other M4s would be hit and knocked out. He would come to the realization that his bow gunner and assistant driver, Arthur Reed, had been killed in action on impact. With so many tanks knocked out, the entire unit was forced to retreat, and in a matter of minutes, Poole's entire battalion had lost 25% of its men, 177 soldiers, and 18 tanks. So Poole's unit falls back to the rear and they begin consolidating, figuring out how many people died, how many tanks they lost, refitting, getting reinforcements, getting everything done. And Poole receives word that his tank, while it was knocked out, is salvageable and it's going to be up and running in a couple of weeks. At this point, most tank crews would be like, cool, I'll take a couple of weeks off hanging out back here, not getting ambushed. But War Daddy and his crew are absolutely furious that their friend was just killed and they want to get back in the fight now, not in 2 weeks. So Poole demands a new tank, and his chain of command, seeing that their golden boy wanted a new tank, turns and says, here you go, and they give him their very first version of the new Sherman M4, the M4A176W, with an even bigger gun that's more capable of going toe-to-toe with German tanks. They are then immediately given a replacement bow gunner and assistant driver by the name of Bert Close, a 19-year-old kid that looks like he just got out of a high school classroom. And for that reason, he is immediately given the nickname Schoolboy as they paint In the Mood 2 down the side of their new tank and go back into the fight. Poole said he learned more in that first 3 minutes of combat than he did in the 3 years of training prior to that. He took note of how the Germans put their main anti-tank guns in the corners of the hedgerows to triangulate fire at the middle of the field, and they waited until they got into the middle of the field before opening fire so they couldn't retreat back into the hedgerows easily. For that reason, every time they cut through a hedgerow, they would immediately use the main gun and fire on each corner ahead of them, and then rake everything in between with machine gun fire, attempting to ambush the enemy first. And this extremely slow, painstaking form of combat went on for the first month. Just field after field, ambush after ambush, fight after fight. It took them a month to go 5 miles further into enemy territory. This wasn't just Poole's unit. This was the entire military fighting tooth and nail for every inch of land that they got. Because of this, General Omar Bradley decided to launch Operation Cobra on July 25th. The plan was to bomb the enemy first, and then bomb the enemy again and again and again, and then roll in with tanks and take care of whatever's left. On July 26, 1944, Operation Cobra will reach its apex when 3,300 Allied bombers dropped 14,000 tons of bombs in the span of 3 hours. Just for the record, so we're all clear, 14,000 tons is over 30 million pounds in 3 hours. With all the bombings breaking down the enemy
That's
line,
a lot.
During that time, In the Mood 2 would come toe-to-toe with its first German Panther tank, and it would take it out in a single shot with its new and improved 76mm cannon. From that moment on, War Daddy, his crew, and In the Mood 2 led point on pretty much every single mission his unit ran, and he was driving the enemy back as fast as humanly possible. In the following days, it became pretty apparent to pretty much everybody that War Daddy and In the Mood 2 were in fact the main characters of this story, as he began sitting up higher and higher in his commander's position on the tank. And at this point, Poole, being who he is like, I'm not waiting for that thing to get fixed, just give me another tank so I can keep fighting. And the chain of command is like, actually, that's perfect, because now your original tank is fixed, so you can just have that one back. No! God! Poole immediately is like, no,
here's your original tank.
It's older, it's slower, the gun is smaller, and most importantly, my friend died in the assistant driver's seat, and I don't want to look at that for the rest of the
Yeah, what a downgrade.
He was then given a direct order to take the tank, to which he's like, okay, fine. He then orders the rest of his crew to go over to In the Mood 2 and observe it getting fixed by the mechanics and having a new motor put in it, which is weird because they're not getting that tank back anyways, so why on earth is he doing that? In reality, he just wanted to make sure that his crew was somewhere so they couldn't get blamed with what he's about to do. So he goes over by himself, picks up his new tank, and then proceeds to immediately drive it directly into a lake. I mean, technically, we don't know that for sure. The only official documentation as to what happened to this tank is from the maintenance crew, and it says, and I quote, "The vehicle was believed to have been driven into a lake."
Thanks. Nice.
And at this point, the chain of command is just like, okay, well, I mean, hold on. This is the golden boy. I don't want to get rid of him. Hear me out. He did just save a tank the other day that we were going to lose. He ran in front of a bunch of machine gun fire and got that tank back. So now that he threw this tank away, it's basically a net zero. I think we should just let it slide. Go ahead, give him a new M4A176W again, and we'll get him back on the front lines. And that's it. That's the whole story. They give him a new tank, and he goes back to...
I love how he keeps, like, switching the side of the video. I'm like, what the hell? Why is the dog there now?
Armor, okay? Going toe-to-toe with the enemy and, like, doing some crazy stuff and surviving, that's one level. Going toe-to-toe with Uncle Sam about his money is a completely another level of plot armor that most people can't even fathom. For example, when you go to get out of the military, they make you turn in every piece of equipment they ever gave you, ever. Okay? They're gonna pull out a sheet of paper that's this long with a list of all of it, and it's gonna be the most ridiculous stuff on the planet. They're gonna be like, yeah, we gave you a a marker tube type in 2003. What the fuck is a marker tube type? Oh, a Sharpie. You gave me a Sharpie in 2003? Okay, I'll just pay for it. How much does the government pay for Sharpies? $79.95 is what we pay for fucking Sharpies around here. And then you have to pay the government $79.95 for a Sharpie that you lost 20 years ago, otherwise they negatively impact your credit score. The rest of us mere mortals are over here getting harassed by the US military because we lost a canteen cup at some point. Meanwhile, War Daddy's over here waterboarding an entire tank and just walking away like nothing happened and nobody cares. He gets his new tank in the Mood 3. August 17th, the very next day, they come into a humongous battle. They catch up with an entire German armored unit that has 12 Panther tanks. Luckily, the Allied forces at this point in time have air superiority, so they radio in for some planes, and they come in and they bomb the entire Panther unit. Then, after the planes drop a bunch of bombs all over them, then all of the American Sherman tanks start to advance. And then a couple minutes later, another group of American planes come. They were either P-38s or P-47s, depending on which source you want to read. Doesn't really matter. Either way, American planes come, and then they proceeded to bomb everybody, the American tanks included. And during this bombing run, in the Mood 3 and the tank next to it would both be hit. Luckily, nobody in War Daddy's crew would be hurt. However, both of the tanks were knocked out. At which point, the battalion commander orders everybody to fall back because things have just went catastrophically wrong. Poole orders his men to all bail out and run back. Baby the driver and Jailbird the loader, both cool, dope. They hop out of the tank, they run back. It is now Poole and Schoolboy left inside this tank. The other tank right next to In the Mood 3 also bails out and they all run off. However, one of those crew members is hurt and they're laying on the ground. War Daddy sees this, hops out of his tank, runs over to try to save this guy, drawing all of the machine gun fire from the German side on In the Mood 3. War Daddy ends up making it over to this other tanker and helping to save him. However, Bert Close, Schoolboy, is now pinned down underneath In the Mood 3, so he just digs in and buries himself underneath the tank, hoping that he's not hit by enemy machine gun fire or an American plane. So that's all he does. He just lays underneath the tank and kind of buries himself in the dirt, and he waits, listening to the machine gun fire bounce off his tank as he hears American bombs exploding in the background, and he just waits. And 10 minutes go by, and suddenly somebody runs and dives under the tank, and it scares the shit out of Bert Close. And he looks over, it's an American, so he kind of relaxes for a second, but that dude doesn't see Bert yet. And Bert Close, Schoolboy, recognizes this guy. It was his friend from basic training that he hadn't seen in like 2 years. And Close remembers on the first day of basic training, this guy got asked a question by the drill instructor, and he told the drill instructor, "I don't know." And from that point on, throughout the rest of their training, that particular drill instructor would always tell this guy, "What do you know?" Bearing that in mind, Schoolboy asks the guy, "Hey, what the hell happened?" And that guy responds, "I have no idea." To which Schoolboy responds the same thing the drill instructor would have responded, "What do you know?" And that guy whipped his head around, recognizing the voice of his friend, and they were reunited after like 2 years not seeing each other, not knowing.
Oh, for a second I thought he died, but
into each other in the most unfortunate circumstance on the planet.
Okay.
And then they just hung out for the next hour in the middle of this firefight.
Nice.
Because there's literally nothing else they could do, and it's the most army thing I've ever heard. Ever.
Yeah,
So
for
Close
real.
is catching up with his buddy. War Daddy makes his way back to safety. He carries that injured.
Oh, that's a
tanker with
fun
him.
story.
Then he realizes that he's missing Bert Close, Schoolboy, and he was not about to lose another assistant driver and bow gunner. And he is ready to run back into hell to go get him too. He is then physically restrained and given a direct order to not. So like an hour goes by, Schoolboy and his buddy are just chilling underneath the remnants of In the Mood 3, waiting for the bombs to clear up. Finally, the German armor unit's forced to retreat. They get the all clear, the planes aren't going to be coming anymore, and then they just kind of get out from underneath the tank and walk back, and everything's okay. So now the next problem is that In the Mood 3 is gone, they no longer have a tank. Well, by that time, they had already replaced the motor in the Mood 2, and they were ready to hop back in that. So the next day, August 18th through August 26th, War Daddy and the crew of In the Mood 2 go ham. They spearhead every single mission, driving further and further into enemy territory, wrecking absolutely anybody that gets in their way. Poole and In the Mood 3 are leading the entire 3rd Armored Division deeper and deeper in enemy territory, and during this point of the war, the 3rd Armored Division earns the nickname the Spearhead Division because they are leading the rest of the military into the fight because they are advancing so rapidly. It is literally the largest unhealthcare system in the world being spearheaded by War Daddy and his crew of In the Mood 2.
it really feels like they have no fear.
Enemy territory story that they start getting direct orders from the battalion commander to slow down and let everybody else catch up. There's accounts of In the Mood 2 taking out entire infantry companies by themselves, 250 men in a single day. And somehow, presumably divine plot armor, despite the fact that they are the first and sometimes the only one into a fight, they go completely untouched every single time. Then, August 27th, they come across a major set of train tracks, at which point they're all like, I got an idea, let's line the tanks up and wait. And that's what they did, and they waited. And they waited, and like 8 hours later, here comes a German train full of all types of cargo and equipment and tanks and armored vehicles rolling down the tracks, and a bunch of Sherman tanks just open fire, turning the entire thing into a shooting gallery, destroying absolutely everything on this train. At which point, Poole is like, cool. Now that I know which direction the trains are headed, I'm gonna go get the next one. And he takes off heading the opposite direction that the train is gonna be coming. So he's gonna catch this train before anybody else. And sure enough, like an hour later, here comes another train headed in the exact same direction. It is now In the Mood 2 and this train going head to head as In the Mood 2 starts firing 76mm rounds into the engine of the locomotive. After 2 shots, it completely destroys the locomotive engine as the rest of the train glides to a halt. As they pull around and the rest of the train comes into view, there are 4 German Tiger II tanks on this train. They haven't even ran into one of these in combat yet, and there's 4 of them sitting dead on this train, but the Germans are running to get in the tanks to use them as artillery and get the guns aimed at In the Mood 2. And one of those German guns will absolutely destroy In the Mood 2. Probably with a single hit. At this point, Schoolboy starts using his 30 cal machine gun and War Daddy starts using the 50 cal up top to shoot at these German Tiger tanks. Not because it's actually going to hurt the tanks, but because all the machine gun fire is keeping the Germans from getting inside of them to be able to use them. And while that's going on, Groundhog is opening fire on the tanks with the 76mm over and over, finally being able to break through the Tiger tanks' armor, destroying all 4 of the tanks as they continue to destroy everything else on this train. For the next half hour, it is a complete shooting gallery as In the Mood 2 wreaks havoc on this now defenseless train. At some point, the rest of the tanks catch up and they chip into, but the majority of the credit ends up going to In the Mood 2. When the smoke clears, they make sure all the Germans are gone, and then they go in and see what else, if there's any cargo that's salvageable, hoping for like, I don't know, German chocolate, or food, or most importantly, booze. And they go in and they start looking at all the cargo, and it's an entire train, besides the tanks and a couple armored cars that were on there. All the cargo is just like French lingerie and fancy perfumes and a bunch of woman stuff. Basically, they figured the Germans were just loading up trains full of anything they could find of value inside of France and trying to ship it back by rail to Germany to extract as much value as possible as they were being forced to retreat. Now, here's the silver lining. Somebody had the brilliant idea of like, hey, it's not food and it's not beer, but hear me out. The entire 3rd AD is on its way to Belgium right now. And if we show up in Belgium and we give all the ladies there a bunch of French lingerie and perfume, we're gonna be heroes, and then maybe, just maybe, they'll wear it for us. If so facto, there's now an entire regiment of M4 Sherman tanks and armored cars full to the brim of fancy French lingerie and perfume headed to Belgium. Now at this point,
a little far-fetched, but I mean, what else are you gonna do with it? Might still be one option.
Just took out an entire train pretty much by themselves, including 4 German Tiger II tanks, so we need to get them some kind of award. So it becomes clear to the chain of command that these are probably the best tank crew that America has right now, and they would do a better job of serving the country if they were sent back home and sent on tour where they could tell their story and help sell war bonds, and honestly, they've earned it at this point. So the chain of command then orders Poole to fall all the way back to the very rear and let everybody else handle everything from here on out. Fast forward 2 hours later, whoever's spearheading the formation now comes up to this bridge, and this bridge is the only way across this river, and it's being guarded by 3 German Panthers, and leadership has no idea how to cross this bridge. So leadership has another meeting, and they're like, fuck, I guess, let's get War Daddy back up here. We need the main character. Bring him up. So
The main character. I've never seen this movie, so this is a completely new story to me.
He gets to the front, gets briefed on what's going on, he evaluates the situation, he looks off in the distance, there's this big hill on their side of the river. So he's like, okay, you guys stay here, I'm gonna go handle this. So they drive up to the top of this hill. He now has a good view of the rest of the river, and he can actually make out one of the German Panther tanks. He can't see the other 2. He doesn't know how many are there. He just knows they're there. They're so well camouflaged, but he can see one of them. So he takes aim and he gets them ready, and he's like, we're just gonna rapid fire this entire thing. He opens fire, and as soon as he fires, there's another round in by Jailbird, and they fire again and again and again, and they take out this first Panther tank, and they do it so fast and they fire so many times that all the other tanks think that they're getting ambushed, and they start retreating. There was only 2 tanks there. He sees them once they start moving, but those tanks take off, thinking that there's way more tanks than just one attacking them. Meanwhile, Poole's entire unit's kind of just sitting there like listening, hearing tank fire in the background, wondering what's happening. A few minutes later, Poole comes driving by again and just drives right across the bridge. So everybody else is like, okay, and then they follow him, and then problem solved. War Daddy saved the day yet again.
Okay, yet again.
Himself like, okay, this is the point where I'm supposed to stop, get orders. They're probably going to send me to the back of the formation again, and he's like, but I don't want that, because off in the distance, a couple miles ahead, he sees a German town, and he knows that that town is probably full of all types of important German supplies, because a second ago, they had 3 German Panther tanks trained on a single choke point. It was a pretty safe place to be, and he knows that if he can get there in a hurry, he can probably take out a bunch of more enemy objectives, so he just hauls ass straight into this town, right down Main Street, and sure enough, there's 4 German ammo trucks full of German war supplies, and he takes out all 4 of them by himself, as the rest of the unit is desperately trying to keep up. After a while, some of the other tanks finally catch up to Poole, but Poole keeps leading them deeper and further into enemy-held territory, and at dusk that night, they'd be ambushed by more Panther tanks. And that ambush started by one of the Panther tanks shooting directly at In the Mood 2. Luckily, it was a glancing blow, and everybody was okay. In the Mood turns, returns fire, and scores a direct hit, knocking out the tank as the German crew bails out. But the tank didn't burst into flames yet, and that's not acceptable. So, In the Mood 2 advances to shoot this tank again. As they hit it again, the whole thing blows up, as In the Mood 2 gets hit again from another Panther tank. And again, it glances off the armor, and everybody's okay. But they don't know where the hell it came from, because it's so dark out, they can't actually see anything. So now, they're just waiting, and they're waiting, and they're kind of moving back and forth, and this Panther tank fires at him again, and they could see the muzzle flash. The Panther missed, and In the Mood starts returning fire just in that general direction, firing blindly. And after 4 or 5 rounds sent that way, they see an enormous explosion and flames as they had scored a direct hit on the enemy Panther tank with
Damn.
pure luck. Any remaining German
Pure
tanks
luck, yeah,
and
indeed.
that was the
It's
end of that
crazy.
battle. The next morning, War Daddy and In the Mood 2 take off hauling ass with the rest of the tanks. Poole figures that those 2 German Panthers ambushed them because they were trying to protect something, and he wants to find out what it was. So he keeps charging deeper and deeper into enemy-held territory, and that's when he comes across an entire German supply convoy. And yet again, War Daddy and In the Mood proceed to turn this entire supply caravan into a shooting gallery. In the Mood alone is credited with destroying over 100 vehicles, 2 German Panther tanks, 2 other tanks, 3 German 88 anti-tank guns, claiming over 50 enemies KIA, claiming 63 as prisoners of war, and a ton of others wounded. When the smoke settles from this and the leadership gets to figure out what actually happened, it is decided that the In the Mood crew is all going to receive Bronze Stars, and Lafayette Green Poole is going to receive the Distinguished Service Cross. He would also be nominated for the Medal of Honor, but that was rejected for some reason. Something to do with being in a tank is a team effort, and he didn't do it by himself, so he doesn't deserve the Medal of Honor, which doesn't really make sense, but
No.
it never does. So that happened. Now from here, it's pretty smooth sailing. They don't have much contact with the German military. They're pretty much just going from town to town, hanging out in a town at the end of every night. However, In the Mood continues to be the #1 spearhead of the entire division, and now, instead of being the first into contact, they're the first into every town, and that comes with its own unique set of rewards, because as soon as American tanks start rolling in, all the people come running out as they start celebrating that the Americans are here to beat the Nazis, and they start showering them with gifts, cheeses, breads, fruits, eggs, and most importantly,
Eggs.
booze. So in the Mood gets first dibs on all the booze. This pattern repeats itself day after day for a little while, and then they eventually come up on a bigger city called Liège in Belgium. Once there, they take the city pretty easily, capturing 1,500 German POWs, and then they've essentially freed the town. Soldiers break out the fancy lingerie and perfume that they liberated from that train a couple of days ago. And this
Yeah, now they can finally use that stuff they
entire thing
found.
turns into one gigantic block party that kind of ends up turning into a shit show, because all the soldiers spread out as they start sleeping with all these young women, showing them that inches are in fact better than centimeters, and everybody's just completely
Second time I've heard him
Which was
say
fine. There's
that.
nothing wrong with that, right up until the next morning when the chain of command got the order to move out immediately. At which point the leadership, A, they're hungover, but B, they're kind of looking around, it's just like there's passed out people drunk all over the city, on the sidewalks, in the streets. It's chaos. The soldiers are all spread out because they all went home with different women. They don't know where like 75% of their soldiers even are. They radio back. They're like,
They had one hell of a party.
we're gonna need a couple of days to regroup. We had an issue in town here. So after that, they spend the next couple of days.
Yeah, everyone needs to deal with their hangovers.
It's off to the Siegfried Line, the border of Germany, guarded by dragon's teeth, mines, machine gun positions, and barbed wire. They have to finally make their last push and break into Germany. On their way to the Siegfried Line, Poole is informed that him and his crew are not going to be allowed to spearhead this mission either, and they are to remain in the rear because him and his crew are still going to get sent home early so that they can sell war bonds and be heroes. Poole is also informed that they are going to be taking away his loader. Del Boggs, Jailbird, is going to be sent all the way to the rear where he is going to have to undergo a vision and hearing exam for the next 2 weeks, pretty much the entire duration of the rest of their time in theater before they get sent back home. And the actual reason for this was because his brother had passed away in combat 2 weeks prior, and he was the last remaining son in his family, and the commander did not want to have to tell that man's family that he died in combat 2 weeks before he was supposed to come home. So he was going to be sent all the way to the rear where he was going to stay until he could get sent back to America. Bearing all this in mind, Poole agrees, and he is going to remain in the rear of the formation, and he's not going to be doing anything crazy. He is then assigned a brand new, fresh out of basic training, Private First Class Kenneth King to be the replacement loader for Jailbird, the best M4 loader in all of World War II. Somehow a German tank snuck past the American line and managed to ambush Poole's section, and the first tank they managed to shoot was in the mood. Poole immediately orders his crew to return fire, which they do, but the shell wasn't effective against the Panther, as he orders them to fire again, but Private First Class Kenneth King wasn't able to reload at the same pace that Jailbird was before him. So Poole orders Baby to throw it in reverse as he tries to get this kid more time to reload the gun. He ends up jamming the gun as the Panther fires another shell at In the Mood, and it punches through In the Mood and hits Private First Class Kenneth King directly in the head, killing him instantly. As Poole and Groundhog are both ejected from the tank, severely wounded, and the tank is still being thrown in reverse, being manned by nobody except for Baby and Schoolboy. Driving blind, they just continue to travel in reverse as another Panther shell hits In the Mood but glances off. After about 30 yards, they end up hitting a ditch and rolling the entire tank. While that's going on, Poole, who'd been ejected from the tank moments earlier, looks down to see that one of his legs has been completely shredded by the shrapnel. As he reaches into his pocket, pulls out a morphine syringe, basically a single one-time use dose of morphine, injects himself before pulling out his pocket knife and attempting to remove what's left of his leg. The nearby American tanks engage the German Panther, destroying it as a neighboring tank commander runs to Poole's aid. As Poole is yelling at him to go help the people in the tank, he doesn't. He runs up to Poole, injects him with another morphine syringe before calling medics to aid him. When the medics show up, they inject him with yet another morphine syringe, and Poole loses consciousness.
Yeah, I get that after 3 shots.
End up ultimately getting reassigned to different tank crews where they remain for the rest of World War II. Poole, on the other hand, has to have his right leg amputated 8 inches above the knee, and he is sent back home where he spends the next 22 months in the hospital battling different infections, rehabbing, and getting fitted for a prosthetic. By the time he's released from the hospital, it is 1946 and World War II is over, and he is then immediately discharged from the United States military because he now no longer has a leg. Lafayette Green Poole, aka War Daddy, and his tank crew of In the Mood were in combat together for 81 days in World War II. And in that 81 days, they are credited with taking out 1,000 German soldiers, capturing 250 more, destroying 275 armored vehicles, and 12 German tanks. For this, Poole
that is insane.
Medal of Honor twice. The first time the paperwork had apparently been lost, and the second time he was just flat out rejected. He was, however, awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the Legion of Merit, a Purple Heart, the French Croix de Guerre, and the Belgian Fourrière. After being released from the military, he went back home to Texas, where him and his wife started having kids, and he worked as a mechanic at a gas station for a number of years. And then, after a few years, the United States military came out with a special program where they would let people rejoin the military if they had special or desired talents, regardless of their physical disabilities, and Poole fit that bill. He was brought back into the military to serve as an advisor and to help train the next generation of tankers.
Oh, that's so nice.
From 1948 until retiring in 1960 as a Warrant Officer 4. He then decides that his next life adventure is going to be a preacher, which he does for a number of years, which honestly makes sense because the dude is super good at putting people in touch with God. So, go. He does that for a little while, and then he gets bored with that, and he decides that he wants to give back and help the community, so he decides that he's going to be a teacher. He goes and he becomes a middle school shop teacher, and on the first day of any kid's shop class, he would always lecture them on the importance of safety and how dangerous power tools could be, right before drilling a hole directly into his wooden prosthetic leg, but the kids didn't know that at the time. After that, he finally does truly retire, and in his retirement, he forms
That is funny.
armored units out of Fort Hood. They bring him out there, they let him drive in an M1 Abrams tank for the first time. He's blown away at how much better they are than the tanks that he drove during World War II. They also have him as the guest of honor at all their military events where he commonly gets to speak and he gets to know all the guys. And then in 1990, they're sent off to fight in Desert Storm. If you don't know, Desert Storm is considered to be the last great tank battles the world has ever seen. The last time that tanks were going toe-to-toe with one another on the battlefield. And the entire time that his guys were out there, Lafayette Poole was back home, glued to the news, watching it every single moment.
Yeah, I imagine.
And as Desert Storm, and by extension, tank versus tank warfare would come to a close, so would Lafayette Poole. His health began to decline, and he would pass away at the age of 71 on May 30th, 1991, the very same day that he received word that his armored unit out of Fort Hood had made their way to Germany safely on their way back home to America, because Desert Storm was over. Bringing a close not only to tank warfare as the world knew it, but the life of one of the greatest men to ever do it. So, in conclusion, if this has taught us anything, never underestimate what you can accomplish by cheating on your next eye exam.
Yeah. I still won't do it when I go for new glasses, but yeah, for like an exam or a job or anything, who knows? Again, a video about a guy who did like a lot, like who accomplished a lot, and just especially when he listed everything they accomplished in those 81 days, it's just like, that's insane. How can you do that? I also get where the nicknames come from now, and yeah, it's just like, this video was 40 minutes, and it's just him listing all the things he did, all the good things he did, and I'm like, every time I'm just like, can you even do more good stuff? Like, can you even be more of a hero, you know? And I guess like the emotional part was like him losing his leg and then having to like leave the military, of course. But I think it was also really heartwarming to hear that years later he could come back and, well, he wasn't like fighting himself anymore, but I think they said he became like an instructor or something like that, or just like teaching stuff. And then he was just like let back in there. But then eventually he became just like a regular like high school teacher or middle school teacher. And then the story about him just like drilling a hole in his leg. That's just, I don't know, it's so funny. I feel like it must always be so weird. Like if you accomplished so much in like a war or something, and then you have to go back to normal life, and it's like not even that many people know that you're just like a regular guy again. But I mean, he did get a lot of like, how do you call it, like prizes or awards, yeah, for his bravery and just the stuff he did. So yeah, it's really just a hero. War Daddy sounds a bit funny, but yeah, it's a funny nickname, but it's also a cool nickname. But like all the guys, they all had funny nicknames, apart from one, I think. But yeah, very interesting story. That leaves me to one more video. This is a bit of a shorter one where we're gonna end with, and I feel like a bit of a less serious one again. This video is called When Marines Took a Duck into Battle in World War II, the Devil Duck. A duck into battle. And my patron says we close out with the Marine Corps Devil Duck, the only Marine credited with vanquishing a Japanese chicken in battle in the Pacific. I feel like this is gonna be a pretty funny video. I'm really wondering what the duck did there and why the duck was in battle. But yeah, we're gonna see a video about this Devil Duck, and I'm very curious about it, so yeah, let's check it out.
This is probably the most Marine Corps story I've ever heard in my entire life, and there's absolutely no way that it's been embellished. Like a lot. I've already talked about the Marine Corps' most famous animal hero, Sergeant Reckless, the horse that was adopted by the Marines during the Korean War that would go on to become the hero of Outpost Vegas and the first horse to ever partake in a Marine Corps amphibious landing. But before Sergeant Reckless, the Marine Corps had another hero from the animal kingdom that partook in multiple amphibious landings in the Pacific theater of World War II. Today we're talking about Sergeant Seawash, aka
Even has a name.
the Devil Duck. Our story begins in 1942 as the 2nd Marine Division is currently in New Zealand gearing up to go into combat against the Japanese in World War II. And like all great military stories, it totally happened. It begins in a bar with a bunch of Marines drinking. And as is tradition with the military drinking at a bar, there are conflicting reports as to what actually happened. According to the Marine Corps, the Marines went out to a local bar in New Zealand. They then started drinking with the locals, and they all had a great, very professional, cordial time where they all drank a very appropriate amount of alcohol, potentially even a Surgeon General recommended amount. Now, while they were at the bar, there was also a raffle, and apparently a bunch of the Marines bought these tickets for this raffle, and one of the Marines by the name of Sergeant Francis Fagan ended up winning the raffle. Now, the grand prize for this raffle at a bar in New Zealand was apparently a duck. And that's what the Marine Corps says happened. Now, according to the other sources, mostly the personal accounts of the Marines that were actually there, and quite frankly, common sense, says that the Marines were at this local bar partying their faces off like they were about to go into the biggest armed conflict the world has ever seen, and while they were there, some of the Marines were playing poker with the locals, and the Marines apparently took all of their money, and they came back to the table, and they're like, all right, well, here's my prize duck, I'm gonna put that up as a wager, and the Marines...
So they won the duck.
Regardless, either way, Francis Fagan, and by extension, the Marine Corps, now has a duck. So what are the Marines gonna do with the duck? Obviously, they take it under their wing.
Random. Okay.
History time. Sorry about that. Anyways, the Marines pretty much immediately teach this duck how to drink beer, which I know what you're thinking. That's probably not very healthy for the duck, but to be fair, there are worse vices to have. I mean, he could get addicted to quack.
No.
Sorry. Okay, I'm done with the dead. So that joke was foul. Anyways, they become drinking buddies with this duck. He becomes one of the Marines, and then time comes for them to all go off to war and actually engage with the Japanese. Sure enough, they take the duck with them. Fast forward, November 1943, the Battle of Tarawa. It's one of the bloodiest battles in Marine Corps history. Essentially, the Japanese have 4,000 soldiers dug in and heavily fortified on the Tarawa Atoll, and the Marines have to go in there and take them out. Now, what's unique about Tarawa is it is surrounded by coral reefs, and what that means is any traditional landing craft that America could use, like a Higgins boat, similar to what we used over in the European theater, would get hung up on these coral reefs, and the Japanese would be able to spray it with machine gun fire and artillery and mortars and kill absolutely everybody. The Japanese were so confident in these coral reefs and their fortified defenses that Admiral Shimasaki said that it would take 1,000,000 men 100 years to take Tarawa. But he didn't know that the Marine Corps had the LVT, the Landing Vehicle Tracked, aka the Amphibious Tractor. Similar to a Higgins boat, except it had tracks on it, and then when it hit the coral reefs, it would simply drive right over the top of them. So November 20th, 1943, at 3 a.m., under the cover of darkness, 18,000 Marines and one duck would load into their salamander
And
tractors
one duck.
as they prepared to launch their amphibious landing at the quack of dawn. As dawn broke, the Japanese soldiers watched in horror.
I can't with these quack jokes.
Not hung up on the reefs, but simply drove right over the top of them. The only surviving Japanese officer from this battle, Kiyoshi Ota, would later go on to write, "We could see the American landing craft coming towards us like dozens of spiders over the surface of the water, as one of my men exclaimed, 'The gods of death have come.'" As the Marines reached the beach, they would become pinned down from heavy machine gun, artillery, and mortar fire. They were only able to secure the first 70 yards of the beach after hours of combat. It is at this point that the Marines' front line was charged by an enemy rooster, and Sergeant Seawash charged past the Marine line to meet the chicken in winged combat in the middle of the battlefield. After sustaining several pecks to the head, Seawash was able to repel the enemy ambush and save his fellow Marines. The Marines would then go on in the following days to completely take over the island. The Japanese believed that it would take 1,000,000 men 100 years. In reality, it took 18,000 Marines and one devil duck 72 hours. For sustaining multiple peck wounds on the battlefield, the Marines tried to get Seawash the Purple Heart. Unfortunately, that wasn't going to work out, but the chain of command still cited Seawash for bravery on the battlefield. That citation, written by Lieutenant Colonel Presley M. Brexley, is as follows: "For courageous action and wounds received on Tarawa and the Gilbert Islands, November 1943, with utter disregard for his own personal safety,
I love that
Seawash,
this is such a
upon reaching the
thing.
beach without hesitation, engaged the enemy in fierce combat, namely one rooster of Japanese ancestry, and though wounded on the head by repeated pecks, he soon routed his opposition. He then refused medical aid until all wounded members of his section had been taken care of first." Seawash and his fellow Marines would then see battle again at the Battle of Saipan, also known as the D-Day of the Pacific. However, allegedly due to some intel, there would be no enemy poultry on the beach, so Seawash's services were no longer needed, and he would remain on the boat for the initial 3 days of the battle. After that, he would go ashore and support his fellow Marines. At the conclusion of the Battle of Saipan, the Marines had gained valuable intel regarding the neighboring island of Tinian, and they would immediately launch another attack to gain that island as well, and this time, the Devil Duck would partake in the amphibious landing. From there, he would identify an enemy duck that he would engage in build combat until forcing it to finally retreat. A couple of days after that, the Marines would take the island entirely, and shortly after that, Sergeant Seawash would lay an egg. Apparently, Seawash and the other duck I mentioned a minute ago were doing a little bit more than just fighting. Either way, at this point, the Marines now realize that Sergeant Seawash is in fact a girl, to which they're like,
A woman!
Damn, this
just
reference.
Kidding, they didn't actually care. In reality, they were probably giving each other a hard time, like, all right, who did it? Fess up. Tania would be the last time that Sergeant Seawash ever saw combat. After World War II, she would end up getting sent back home to America with her fellow Marines and her primary caretaker, Francis Fagan. From there, the
That's
story
so
of
cute.
Sergeant Seawash picked up traction, being in Time magazine, having multiple radio appearances, being in a bunch of different newspapers, telling the harrowing story of America's one and only Devil Duck. And while all that's going on, she is partying her bill off with her Marines, drinking beer after beer, while also helping the Marines hit on young women. And I actually believe this to be the first historical appearance of the term wingman being used in relation to picking up women. Okay, I mean, look at this. Fagan and Seawash have more game than an Xbox. That man's about to get more than an animal shelter. Over the next couple months, the publicity would die down, and Francis Fagan would go on to become an electrician.
Oh, this is
His
so
great-grandson
funny.
would also go on to become an electrician that had a pretty decent-sized YouTube channel. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not related to this guy. Anyways, Sergeant Seawash would also then go to live on a farm for an extended period of time until being called back into duty during the Korean War, where she helped with recruiting efforts. After that, she would finally retire to live out the rest of her days in the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago before passing away in 1953 due to liver complications, which prompted the Marines to release a statement saying that there is no reason to believe that her liver complications were due to her excessive amount of drinking during her time in service. According to multiple newspapers, her funeral service was then held in a taxidermy shop where she was then stuffed and currently resides in the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Triangle, Virginia. So in conclusion, this has been the totally real, 100% not embellished whatsoever story of Sergeant Seawash, aka America's Devil Duck. That time the Marine Corps won a duck in a poker game, taught it how to drink beer, then took it to multiple amphibious landings in the deadliest battles of World War II, kept it alive the entire time to bring it back home so they could use it to hit on women, and I think it is the most Marine Corps thing that has ever happened, and if I'm wrong, you can tell me down below, and if your story's better, I'll do a video on that too. Quack, bang, out.
This is the craziest story I've heard today about a duck going to battle. First of all, it was really cute. To be fair, feeding a duck beer, it's not healthy, but I also feel like back then people did that kind of stuff because they just didn't know better or didn't want to know better. But I feel like that duck just had an amazing life. I don't know how it was with this animal, but a lot of times with animals who have that kind of stuff, who have like this intense bond with humans, because I believe I heard kind of a similar story about a bear once. And it was also like a hero. I'm not sure if it was like World War II. It could be. I'm not completely sure right now, but I listened to a podcast once and it instantly made me think of that story. And I remember from that podcast, like the bear, he was like with all the people who took care of him. I actually think it was in like a war or something, and that he was like with like these military people. And it was like he was just like part of them. But then after the war ended, yeah, what are you gonna do with a bear? So I think the bear ended up in a zoo, and then he was like really sad because like those men weren't there anymore, his friends. But then every time they would visit him, he would like really light up and all. I have no idea if that works a bit the same with a duck, or if a duck has like less brains. I'm not sure. They didn't really say anything about that. I think the duck was just fine on the farm. But it was pretty fun that the duck got like called back into duty at the Korean War. Like, oh yeah, by the way, we should also get this duck back. That's just so iconic. Yeah, it's a really funny story. And just the fact that the duck just got like a name, and also the little drawing, it was really like made for that duck. It's really like a thing. So yeah, it's so funny. It's a really funny story. I think it was also a really nice one to end this this video with. So yeah, that was it for today. And yeah, I really heard some interesting things. Most of the things I didn't know yet. I had no idea. But like I said before, what I really like about this guy, his videos really just have like one subject, and that's the only thing you have to focus on. To be fair, I watch multiple videos now, but every time I just had to focus on one subject, so you learn about one subject, and I feel like that sticks longer if you just watch one video about one thing instead of just like watching a documentary and that's going on there and that's going on there, and you know, so that was really nice and really easy to follow. He talks a bit fast, but I think that also keeps in the pace and that keeps it interesting. But it took for me to, but that made me have to pay a little more attention and be a little more focused. So maybe sometimes I don't say a lot, but then that's the reason. I'm just really trying to take it all in. But honestly, all the videos, they were super interesting. I honestly think the second one was maybe my fave, apart from the dog story, of course. Like, I'm not counting the first and the last one. They were like really short and with really random subjects. They were super funny. But if I look at the more like serious videos, of course the other ones, they're serious too, but the subjects are a bit random. And the other three were really like, yeah, just like serious battle, serious heroes, you know. I think the second one was super interesting, just like the anti-hero, just the aspect of someone achieving that much and doing that much, like so many good things. But the way he did that, that was just, yeah, really interesting to me. And of course the other videos as well. Honestly, I don't think there was one boring one. With the third one, I didn't expect there would be like a video that wasn't about the Second World War. So I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna watch some Second World War videos. But then it was just like about taking Guam and how that was like, yeah, pretty weird story actually, if you look at it now. But yeah, like I said, I liked all the videos. So yeah, I had a good time watching it. Always learning new things, so that's nice. Before I end this video, I do want to tell you that if you have something in mind you'd also want me to react to, then you can check out my Patreon, and there is different tiers there. There's also a tier to just request one video. There's also a tier for early access for uncut reactions. But yeah, if you want to request your own video, there's different options there. So check out the link in the description, and there you can find it all. So yeah, let me know which story was your favorite and what you thought of it. If you like my reaction, then please leave a like, subscribe, and then I really hope to see you next time at one of my other videos. Bye!